Good evening, everyone. We're going to be beginning in approximately 3 minutes, just working on some tech issues here at the high school. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Stephen O'Keefe. I'm a member of the Mount Vernon School Board. Today is August the 10th at 6 p.m. I am serving the capacity as chair of our Consolidated School District, SAU 39. I'm going to be calling our meeting to order at 6:05. And as we get started in compliance with New Hampshire RSA, there's two questions I need to ask every board member who's not physically present in the high school today. All right, good evening, everyone. The first question is going to be, was it impractical for you to physically be present, and are you alone? So we are going to go ahead and take a screen poll of those members who are on my screen here, starting off with Mr. Coughlin.
It is impractical and I am alone.
Great. Mr. Chen. David, if you could try that one more time, you were still on mute.
David, I'll come back to you.
Sarah Lawrence.
It is impractical for me to be there in person, and I am alone.
Thank you.
Josh Conklin.
Yes, it is impractical for me to be there, and I am alone.
Thank you, Josh. Scott St. Dennis.
It is impractical for me, and I am alone.
All right. Helen?
It's impractical for me, and I'm alone.
Beth?
It is impractical, oh man, impractical for me to be there in person, and I am alone.
Great. George Torres.
It was impractical for me to be there, and yes, I am alone.
Laura Taylor.
Hello. It's impractical for me to be there, and I am alone.
Thank you. And David Chen. David, we still have mic issues, unfortunately.
Can you hold up a sign?
Thank you. David, I'm assuming it's impractical for you to be in attendance. If you could just give me a thumbs up. Okay. And in the room with me today, I have Mr. Goffier, Ms. Game, Ms. Grund, Ms. Stacy, Mr. Bronsko, and Mr. Eckhoff, and myself, as well as Assistant Superintendent Landwall and several other members of the SAU administration. And if I can ask everyone inside the room here, just hit mute on your microphones so we can avoid any type of feedback. That'd be greatly appreciated. So as we begin this evening, I wanted to make just a quick announcement real fast. And first of all, welcome everyone in attendance at tonight's meeting. I think it's a safe way to speak on behalf of all my fellow board members that we sincerely appreciate your attendance at tonight's meeting, and we look forward to a productive dialogue. Tonight we'll be reviewing our school superintendent's reopening plan as presented by our superintendent, Mr. Adam Steele, and his fellow administrators. But before we get started, I wanted to first acknowledge the countless individuals who over the past 8 weeks have donated their time and effort to draft this plan for our review. Over 100 faculty, staff, community members, medical professionals, and students met 2 to 3 times a week to collaborate and design a plan that incorporates many concepts and safety protocols. As I've said countless times, there was no roadmap for us to refer to. This was a plan that was crafted by all of the participants in a transparent and open process that consistently sought feedback from each of our various stakeholders within our 2 communities of Amherst and Mount Vernon. I would like to draw specific attention to the various individuals who led their respective groups during this process. Starting off first with our school nurses and community medical personnel, Mr. Jim Manning, who is our chairperson, our principals and school administrator, Ms. Anna Parrell, who is our chairperson, the faculty, staff, and associations committee that was co-chaired by myself and our fellow board member, Amy Facey, our parents and community members committee that was chaired by Ms. Shannon Gasquin, and of course, certainly but not least, and most importantly, our students, was chaired by Georgia Craven. And then, of course, I'd be remiss if I did not include our fellow board members that were working behind the scenes over the past several weeks, working on several policies that we're going to be addressing this evening. That's our school board policy committee run by our chairperson, Ms. Kuzma. The time that each member of these various subcommittees gave to our two communities was great and sincerely appreciated by myself. On behalf of my fellow board members, a sincere and enormous thank you to everyone. As we begin our presentation, I would like to cover a few procedural matters. To start our meeting, I have asked each of our respective board chairs to deliver brief opening remarks. I will then ask for our superintendent to begin his presentation. After his presentation, I will open the discussion to my fellow board members. I would also like to note I have solicited well over 500 questions in advance of our session tonight from my fellow board members that have been delivered to our superintendent. Our superintendent has had the opportunity to address them in his presentation this evening and/or at our individual board meetings next week. Once my fellow board members have had the ample opportunity to review the plan discussed this evening and discuss its various components, I will open the meeting to questions from the public. Those questions should be submitted to me via our question answer feature on Zoom and not our chat feature. If you have similar concerns about a question, you may hit the like button to that question to bring it to the top of our question list. If you are participating tonight via Facebook and have a question, I ask that you please click on the link on Facebook that will bring you to our Zoom meeting. Once inside that Zoom meeting, submit your question via the Zoom question answer link. After public comment is closed, I will accept a motion on the administration's reopening plan and call for a vote. All members are reminded of their responsibilities to our community members and are expected to cast a vote. We will then move our conversation to our policy committee to discuss the necessary policy updates to support our reopening plan should it pass. After a second public comment period, I will call for a vote on motions in hand in support of those policies. With that said, I thank you for joining us this evening, and thank you for all the effort and time all those individuals have given us over the last 3 months. I would first like to recognize our Amherst School Board Chair, Ms. Elizabeth Kuzma.
Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of our staff, our administrators, both Clark Wilkins and AMS for all of your hard work over the summer. It has not been easy. There's been a lot of hours put in attending all of the task force meetings. I really want to thank you all. I also want to thank all the parents who reached out and attended all those task force meetings, the sub-task force meetings and everything. And without all of you, we could not have gotten as far as we did. So I want to thank all of you.
Thank you, Ms. Kuzma. Next, I'd like to recognize our Mount Vernon School Board Chair, Ms. Sarah Lawrence.
Thank you, Steve. The Mount Vernon Board would really like to also thank the task force, the administration, our brand new principal, Kimberly Sarfty, all of our teachers and staff at the Village School as well for their time and very thoughtful response to our upcoming school year. The board has had a chance to review the SAU plan and a building level plan. We really do look forward to discussing the issues this evening, asking questions that we've heard from parents and community, and really being partners in getting this year off to a good start. I do want to say also that our board will be meeting on August 17th at 5 p.m. to discuss the specific needs for Mount Vernon and to iron out the logistics of funding and things like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And last, I'd like to recognize our Souhegan Cooperative School Board Chairperson, Pim Gronstra.
Thanks, Steve. Also, thank you to everybody on the task forces. A lot of great work has been done over this time frame. And as with Mount Vernon, we also have a brand new principal. And so thank you, Mike, for jumping right into the fire, so to speak. And there's been a lot of great work on all fronts. And also we have a meeting scheduled a week from tomorrow, the 18th, where we will really get into the details concerning the high school specifically concerning this plan and any of the specific topics and targeted discussions around those. So anybody, I would like to invite rather everybody to tune into that if they so want to. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Pim.
Can
And
I
now
plug
our
something real
superintendent,
quick?
absolutely. Go ahead.
We're also, Amherst is also having a meeting on Monday the 17th, and ours is at 7 o'clock.
Great, thank you. And now our superintendent, Mr. Adam Steele, will present our reopening plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that very much. First, I am not present this evening in person at the high school because I've been out of New England in the past 2 weeks. And so per the governor's orders, I'm remaining outside of being there in person. I'd much prefer to be in person with the rest of you folks. So thank you all for the kind words to all of the folks who've been working on this plan over the past several months. We're very proud of it. We're very proud of the work that's been done. Most notably how we've started in going down one road, and then based on the input from our school nurses, our medical professionals, our administrators, teachers, and students, we've made adjustments that have made the plan what it is today in final form. So very proud of all of that work. The task force that was put together for the purpose of hearing from our community, from all the various stakeholders. And I'm proud to say that I believe our plan represents the interests of all of our various stakeholders throughout our community. And this really is our community's plan. The process to this point has been outlined by Chairman O'Keefe, but that process has been one where we've been very public. We've been transparent in the planning process. We've had meetings that have been open to the public. They've been attended by several hundred people. We've had questions answered along the way by the public and by the community. Many, many questions along the way. And that's led to a set of documents this evening that detail our plan at various levels of depth. So I want to start by saying we're going to go through the structure of the plan this evening. But that's not all that we have prepared for our community. Each school has very detailed plans that are building level plans that are going to be published on our website this evening. They've been provided to our school boards in advance of this meeting so they can review them, and they'll be available to the public once posted on our webpage. Those very detailed plans have not only all of the details we could think to include, but also many of the ones that members of our community have asked via questions or via their input to be included in that plan. In addition, our board members have asked us many, many questions in advance of this meeting. We're proud that they've done that work and given us those questions in writing ahead of time. We've answered those several hundred questions, and we're going to also post those on our website to be available to the community so that you can see the questions that have been asked, and then we will add to those as sort of an FAQ for our public as questions get submitted to us along the way. So what we're trying to say here is that we want this process to be available to you at your level of comfort. If you've got a question that hasn't been answered yet, then please ask it, and we'll get you an answer back and also provide that to our community. So we're very proud of that transparent process that we've had this far. Tonight's meeting is really about the funding and policy objectives that are the responsibility of our school boards. The plan this evening is about the SAU board understanding as a whole the plan that interacts between the 3 districts and 4 schools that we have in our 2 towns. With one plan, our 2 towns, 3 school districts, and 4 schools, that plan hinges on all of us working together and having a plan that works in a way that all systems can be working together. And so that's what the plan is tonight, is that structural plan. Once adopted by this board, each individual board will have the opportunity to review the specific funding requests and the individual things that affect the school or schools within their school district. I want to talk about how when I go through this plan, I'm going to talk specifically about the conditions as we see them today and why we feel comfortable with our plan in opening in status yellow, which you'll know more about that in just a bit, what status yellow is. But I'm going to speak specifically about the conditions as they are on the ground today that give us the confidence that we're ready for this plan to be put into practice. And then finally, before I get into the meat of the plan, I just have to say that as superintendent, it's an honor to be a superintendent in these 2 towns and in these schools. And the plan that we're putting together is something that I hope everybody understands comes from the bottom of my heart, is in the best interest of our students, our staff, our parents, and ultimately our community. None of this has been taken lightly. We have worked as a team of administrators with our teachers associations, with everybody involved. we've worked to understand what is in the best interest of our students and our staff to keep people safe and to contribute our part to our community and keeping our community safe as well. So know while we go through this that none of these plans are meant to be something that is easy for anybody, the easiest path forward. It's meant to be the right pathway forward, the thing that's safest and most prudent for our staff and students. So with that, I'm going to start going through our plan. You're going to hear a lot from me and then eventually turn it over to our school building principals to give an overview of their building level plans. I want to start with what we determined was our overall objective, which is that each student safely achieves at least a year of academic growth by Memorial Day. I want to break that down and make that clear why we chose that as our objective. First of all, we're talking about every single student. We know that each student deserves to have that progress and to be able to be moved forward academically this coming year. And we exist primarily to be an academic institution. We know that. School comes first and the education comes first, but a lot of other things come along with that. We're going to talk about that, the social, emotional needs of our students, and certainly the safety. But we're here as an academic institution, and our objective had to be, how do we move every kid forward a year's worth of school this year? And that was our objective from the beginning. Memorial Day is just an arbitrary point in time. We know that school goes into June. We're not talking about school ending by June, but if we all use Memorial Day as a target, then we have room to do any sort of remediation or extra work in June to make sure every student has hit that target this coming year. So that's our objective, and all of our plans are built around that objective. Some foundations. In other words, our foundational beliefs that have informed our plan. First, we believe that this entire school year and others after it are very likely to be disrupted. Not to instill fear in anybody, but we know that while this school is certainly going to be disrupted as we've started, it's likely that other years past it will have some impact from the COVID-19 crisis. We know that individuals' comfort levels are going to change and be dynamic along with the conditions on the ground. It's unlikely that the way we start the year is going to be the way that we end the year, both in terms of the conditions with COVID-19 and in the relative comfort levels of those in our community. And so we need to have a plan that's adaptable and flexible based on those changing conditions. Third, we believe that the overall guidance for safety protocols is the responsibility of our governor and the Department of Health and Human Services. We're responding to that guidance and we're implementing it in our schools, but ultimately some major decisions are policy decisions at the state level beyond us. We learned from the spring that remote learning is not the same as in-person education, but we know it needs to be rigorous and it needs to be close to being as similar to the real thing as possible. It's not going to be as great as the real in-person schooling. We know that, but we're working awfully hard to make it as close as can be and to make it rigorous for all of our students. And we learned a lot this past spring about it. We know that the learning outcomes, the things that students are expected to learn and be able to do, have to remain intact, even if the way we get there is vastly different. In other words, the standards are still the standards, the outcomes are still the outcomes, the SAT is still the SAT, and so we need to make sure that those remain intact. Next, we believe that our teachers can't do more than one thing at a time. It's unreasonable to expect our teachers to be in a classroom having some students at home, others in front of them in the class, and to manage both of those things well. It might be something that has to happen in very unique circumstances, but on the whole, we built this plan with that belief that teachers can only do one thing at a time. Next, this is a community effort. All of us, every parent, student, teacher, administrator, staff, all of us must be committed to this objective of every student having an academic year of growth this year. We all need to be committed to that for us to be successful. So with those foundational beliefs helped us understand some key things that we need to do in order to hit that objective within that belief system. And the first is choice. We're giving all of our parents, all of our teachers, the choice about how they interact with our school, whether in person or remote. This is the first of many steps of faith on our part because the numbers have to work. Luckily, because we've engaged our parents and our teachers in surveys over the summer, we think we're pretty close and we think this is going to work for us. More to come on that later, but ultimately we think it should be the choice of our parents and our staff to make a decision about what's best for them and what the safe choice is for them and for their family. Next, in order to make that choice possible and to deal with the changing conditions, we've broken our upcoming school year into 11 segments. Most of them are about 4 weeks long, and those segments give our teachers and our students the opportunity to go in between the in-person and remote modality as conditions change and as their comfort level changes with time. In order to do that, we have to have redundancy and flexibility within our teachers so that students have a consistent experience throughout the course of the school year. It does not mean that every student will have the same teacher throughout their entire school year. It does mean that we're creating redundancy and flexibility so students have the same learning outcomes throughout the course of the school year. In order to make this work in a time of flux, in a time of change, every student has to have an anchoring adult, an adult who they can rely on and depend on during this school year to be a common shoreline for them, an anchor that they can return to and have consistent contact with, whether they're in person or in the remote learning modality. In order to make all this work, we need significant professional development for our faculty to ensure they're prepared for how differently this school year is supposed to go according to previous school years. Clearly, we need to leverage the outside whenever possible, outdoor learning strategies and outdoor areas. That creates social distance and also reduces the burden of masks at times when we can maintain that social distance outside. So we want to leverage those outside opportunities. And then we know that the start of the school year has to focus on the connections, the relationships, the communication protocols, all of those things to make sure that no matter what happens this school year, our students have a solid foundation. And that's why it's one of the reasons why it's so important to us to have the opportunity for students to be on campus right from the start. So our task force we heard about a lot already, but they met weekly over the summer, and they were broken down into several subcommittees that were able to engage many of our constituents throughout our 2 towns. Extremely helpful group, and their guidance has been key in developing this plan. This plan hinges on having a status for our schools that can adapt with the times and with the conditions for each of those segments. So we've developed five statuses that are color-coded to make it easy to refer to, that describe the different safety protocols and learning modalities available for our students and our staff. More on these in a minute. I'll go into more detail about these, but red is closed. Orange is our school campus is only open for priority and for a small number of our students, about 25%. Yellow is our school campus is open, but there are significant safety and social distancing restrictions. Green is when we're getting back to almost being in normal status, and we have recommended guidelines for safety protocols, but they're no longer required. And then blue is where we hope to be at some point in this school year, which is near normal campus access. So to break those down a little further, we have to rely on the different decision points that are available to us to determine which status we're going to be in at a given time. So here's how we make that decision. First, the primary way we make that decision is our local determination, relying on our school nurses and other professionals about the status of health and safety in our community. There's several metrics that we're going to use and several things that we're going to track, but not all of those can add up to making a good decision for our community. And there still needs to be some subjective judgment on our part to make this decision. We're working on building a dashboard of data and metrics that will be available to our community and that I will rely on in helping to make these decisions. And so you'll see a lot of what is involved in making that decision. Second, we know that the federal government, the governor or DHHS, has the ability to make some of these decisions for us, and that will certainly have an impact on us. Local case counts and the local data will help determine our status. Right now, I mentioned before, I was going to walk through the current status points and decisions that lead us to being ready to open later this month. So looking at our state, we have under 400 active cases in the state, which is relatively little considering our population. Our positivity rate, the number of cases, number of tests that come back positive as a percentage of all of the tests that are done around the state, is very low, under 2%. It's been that way for a while. That's a very strong sign. Our number of hospitalizations in the state is in the 20s. It has been maintaining there overall, which means that less than 10% of the active cases have resulted in hospitalizations. That's a very positive number. And then our mortality data, the number of deaths have been very low in the past couple of weeks, some days with none and some with 1 or 2 over the past several weeks. That's very positive information that gives us great confidence that we're ready to open our schools in the status yellow, which means we open with safety restrictions in place, like masks all the time inside for all students and staff, except those with a documented reason not to, and social distancing whenever possible, both inside and outside. But that's a part of our decision matrix, is how we get there. Resource availability. So it's possible that we don't have the funds necessary to open our school safely with the right number of resources, more on that later. It's possible that we don't have teachers available at a certain school because of teachers feeling uncomfortable. All of those sorts of resources will affect our ability to move between the statuses that we have, the colored statuses. We know that our parent and faculty relative comfort level will also affect what status we're in. If 100% of our parents, or even a large percentage of our parents, don't feel comfortable sending their kids to school, even if the data shows that it's probably safe to do so, we'll move to a more restrictive status in order to engage more students in the remote modality. So parent and faculty comfort level will make a big difference as well. And then finally, we know that our remote instructional model will improve with time, which will give us even more confidence in using that as a primary mechanism for our students. So more on these statuses and what they mean. First, status red is similar to what we had this past spring. The whole campus is closed, nobody's accessing, it's not available to any students. We hope to avoid this at all costs this coming year, but no guarantees that we won't have to go back to it at some point in time. Status orange is limited. So we're going to limit that and prioritize those with special needs, whatever those special needs might be, those who require additional support in school, and then no more than about 25% of our school population on a rotating basis. So what this means is most likely that one grade level of students at each school will go on every given day of the week, in addition to those students with special needs. So just as an example, this is not the plan, but perhaps all of the first graders at Wilkins on Monday, all of the fifth graders at AMS on Monday, and all of the freshmen at Sauhegan High School, and maybe kindergarten and grade 1 at Mount Vernon Village School. Then the next day, second grade, sixth grade, 10th grade, et cetera. So that would be the plan if we need to severely limit the number of students inside our schools. We'll have very strict cleaning protocols, more on that to come. Masks will be required for our staff on campus and for students, all while indoors. There'll be minimization of travel within our buildings to ensure that students are not mixing with one another, and social distancing will be required except when a student need specifically precludes it, which is some of our students with special needs. Moving on to status yellow. Our campus is open to anybody who wants to come, but we have very strict protocols in place. So again, this ensures that we have very strict cleaning protocols every night and during the day. It requires masks for all staff and students inside school buildings. All of our social distancing is still prioritized, but not all of our classrooms can guarantee that we have social distancing. But with masks in place for everybody while inside, we're going to make that work the best we can with social distancing, even while inside. There will be enforcement of a mask policy. It's non-disciplinary, so this should say non-disciplinary policy supporting the enforcement of safety protocols. There will be times when we hope, when there may be a need for disciplinary action, but for the most part, our masks and safety protocols will be a requirement even to enter our buildings. Status green is when largely the pandemic has passed and we're on our way to going back to near normal operations. Our medical and science group was very clear that if there is a need for safety protocols, they need to be in place inside the school, and so we'll be in status yellow. Status green is when we're getting close to being back to normal operations and we start relaxing some of our guidelines, and we encourage even more students to participate in person. This is when we expect maybe 85 to 90% of our students to be coming onto the school campus and participating in person. And then finally, near normal operations is when we're past the pandemic phase and we are simply allowing folks to still use masks if they feel comfortable, but there's no requirement or even an encouragement to do so. There's very limited, there's almost no reductions in movement or activity within the building. This might be where we start allowing students to eat lunch in the cafeteria as a large group, but maybe where we're still making some thoughtful decisions, like not having a whole class of students in the auditorium or physical education classes. But we're getting pretty close to being normal when we hit status blue. So back to the school year calendar, those 11 segments. Each segment will announce 2 weeks in advance what we expect the status to be moving into that next segment, to give parents and our teachers choice and time to make that decision for themselves about how they'll participate for that next segment. Each of those segments are broken down in a way that allow where school vacations or natural breaks in our school year create those segments. So moving a segment ends at Thanksgiving, another one ends before our Christmas holiday. Those sorts of breaks in our year to make it possible for these to land naturally. We also will make sure that our curriculum lines up with those breaks, so it's easy for students to move between the in-person and remote modality. Much more to come on that, just a hint of that tonight, much more tomorrow in the parent information nights from each of our schools, tomorrow and Wednesday, forgive me. And we want to say up from the start that school vacations may be altered throughout the course of this year based on the conditions. We did that this past year. You might remember that we canceled our April vacation. None of us could go anywhere anyway for April break. And so we continued on with schooling so we could end a week early and enjoy more of our summer weather. Some of those things will still be in play as we move forward. And so just want parents to be aware that some vacations might change based on the conditions. And then again, our goal is to aim for Memorial Day as a natural ending point. If we're in remote learning for an extended period of time, if we have to be in status red or even orange for an extended period of time, we know that there's a shelf life with remote learning and that there's a certain point where there's diminishing returns. And so Memorial Day is sort of our targeted natural ending point, with wrap up in June as needed. But again, that's really if we're in remote learning more than we want to be this year. This is a breakdown with way too much information about the school year segments. You will note that the first 2 segments are only 2 weeks long. We did that intentionally so that even after just a little bit of time, parents can make a different decision for their students about whether they're in person or remote. Same for teachers. And it's I should mention that now, that there will be times when students and or teachers have to leave and change modalities midstream in the middle of a segment. We'll still work with you on that, and we'll work with parents to make that work at a building level. But just know the idea is that when you're making the choice to come to school, whether in person or remote, that you make that at those natural breaks between the segments. So the 4 things that I'm looking for our board this evening is 4 separate things. First is to renew the motion from March. The board, remember at our emergency meeting in March, you gave me the authorization to make many of these changes that we did in the spring and over the summer. And so I think it might make sense for the board to renew that motion. You don't need to, it didn't have an expiration, so it's still in effect, but it might be good for our public to know that that's still in place. We have a COVID-19 temporary policy that we're going to be asking the board to review this evening and to adopt. Third, we're going to ask for you to move to formally support the structural plan. What that does is it enables the constituent school boards, Amherst, Mount Vernon, and Sauhegan, to move forward with their individual board level plans and also deal with the 4th thing, which won't be done at this board level, but at those 3 other boards, is to deal with the appropriations that we need to discuss in order to support this plan. So 3 things tonight, 1 thing for the other boards. Renew the motion from March, adopt a temporary policy, and move the structural plan. So here's a broad overview of the timeline. I'm going to break this down further, but June and July have been all about the structural plan. August really is about policy and budget and the appropriations. And then August through September is how we implement and move forward with all of these plans and put them into practice. So tonight we're at the SAU board meeting. Tonight's where I declare the segment 1 status, which is going to be status yellow, meaning the schools are open to all students to choose to come, but there will be significant restrictions on movement, mask policies, all of that will be in place. Tomorrow and Wednesday are parent information nights. Tomorrow there's one for Clark Wilkins at 4, Sauhegan at 6. On Wednesday, Mount Vernon at 4, AMS at 6. We encourage all parents to attend these meetings. These will be where all of the details are broken down in great detail. It will be helpful for you to review those detailed plans that are on our website in advance. Also to review those questions posed by our board members in advance, so you can be prepared and ask any new questions that haven't been asked yet during those next 2 nights. We're going to be asking you later this week and through Saturday, you're going to receive emails about how you can make your decision for segment 1. So we're hoping to give you all the information you need tonight, tomorrow, and Wednesday to make an informed decision for yourself and your family, so that you'll be able to tell us specifically what your plan is for your student, each student that lives in your house, when we go back to school on September 2nd. The way you're going to get that is we've transitioned our student information system to PowerSchool. Not the greatest summer to make that transition, but we've done it. We've got a great tech staff and they've been working hard at that. So you're going to be getting information about how you can log into PowerSchool as a parent. You'll use that all the time for all sorts of different things as we move forward. But the most important of which first is how you will declare what modality your student will use in the first segment. And then you'll use PowerSchool on an ongoing basis to notify us of your plans for each of the following segments. So more to come on that. So more information to come later this week on that. Next week, our school boards will meet to review and hopefully adopt how we fund these plans. So the Mount Vernon board meets next Monday at 5, Amherst School Board at 7, and then the Sauhegan board next Tuesday at 6 p.m. August 24th through the 27th, and also August 31st through the 1st, we'll have all faculty professional development. Now, those who've been paying attention will probably remember that August 31st was our original first day of school. I'm recommending that we move 2 school days from being school to being professional development for our staff. The reason for that is the governor's plan allows us to do that without penalty, meaning we don't have to make up those 2 days. And also it saves a lot of money because we pay our teachers for professional development as we should. So those 2 days won't require additional funding in order to fund those 2 days of professional development. Both August 28th and September 4th and September 8th, those 3 days, buildings will be open for faculty and staff to be setting up their classrooms and doing work in their classrooms. August 27th and 28th, we'll have opportunities for new students to tour their new school. So if you're an 8th grader moving to Sauhegan as a 9th grader, we'll have opportunities for tours that day to tour Sauhegan High School safely with your parents. Or if you're new to town, if you move to one of our 2 towns, we can schedule opportunities for you to tour your schools and see them in person. There'll be another school board meeting August 27th. This will only be SAU actually, and then the other boards will meet as needed. So the SAU will meet at 6 p.m. on August 27th. Then as we start school, so September 2nd will be the first day for every student at Mount Vernon Village School, whether remote or in person, all of the students at Wilkins, all of the students at AMS, and then grades 9 and 12 at Sauhegan, as Sauhegan normally starts. September 3rd, the next day, will be the first day for students at Clark in kindergarten, and also for those students at Sauhegan in grades 10 and 11. Friday, September 4th is no school. It's been planned that way from the beginning for a long Labor Day weekend. Monday, September 7th is Labor Day. Tuesday, September 8th will be remote only for all students. So the first 2 days of school will be largely to set up protocols and make sure students have no issues with remote as we prepare for that remote only day on September 8th. We're doing that for a number of reasons. First, it's primary election day in New Hampshire, so 2 of our schools will be used for that primary election, and we don't want to mix students with the public because of COVID-19. Also, because we can't predict how our school year will go, we want to make sure our remote learning is in place before we are in a situation where that's our only option. And so we'll use Tuesday, September 8th as that day to make sure it's ready to go. There's also a possibility as we move forward that if our schools are too hot because of the weather, that we'll move to remote only for some days, because the prospect of having students in very hot classrooms also having to wear masks, we know is just not going to create a conducive learning environment. And so there's a possibility in September, if we have really hot days, it will move to remote only as well. Those are our schedule changes. Moving on to the policy, and I will bring up our draft policy here while we're online. This policy is not meant to be a procedure, meaning it doesn't spell out every single thing about our protocols, but what it does do is gives me and the school district the authority to implement some of these things. So as soon as I pull this up, I'll share it on my screen. It also relies on a very important statute, RSA 200:39, allows me as a superintendent to remove students from the building if they fail to adhere to our requirements or if they pose a threat to others around this pandemic. And so RSA 200:39 ensures that it's not disciplinary in nature, but that masks are required under our various statuses that we have. And I'm still pulling this up. Also, it makes access to the physical school campus contingent on something very important from our parents and staff. So in order to access our schools in person, it will be a requirement of anybody accessing the schools to notify the school through the school nurse if they've decided to get a test for COVID-19 for any reason, and also what those test results are once they receive them. The reason for that is we have a very unique situation right now in that we're not guaranteed to know if someone is tested positive in our school community for COVID-19. Those test results go to the individual and to their parents or to the staff member. They do not go to the school directly. The Department of Health and Human Services has responsibility for contact tracing within the state. And so they have an obligation to tell us if they think it's important for us to know as a school that someone or a group of people in our school is tested positive for COVID-19. But there's no guarantee that they will do that for individual cases. So this policy will require folks to do that for us so that we can be made aware when there's a concern of COVID-19 in our schools. So with that, I'm ready to pull up the policy here. And I want to read through this because I think it's important to read through this. So first, this policy starts with the findings and goes through what the governor has done with his emergency orders and his executive orders. So some of this at the top, these findings are simply a recitation of what's in the governor's executive orders. Moving down below, this recites part of RSA 200:39. State law mandates that whenever any student exhibits symptoms of contagion or is a hazard to himself or others, he shall be excluded from the classroom and his parents or guardians shall be notified as soon as possible. First, sorry for the pronouns, this was written in the 1970s. But this is the RSA that we'll use to enforce these requirements. Next, on the basis of these findings, the board authorizes the following policy directives to be implemented based on the superintendent's determination of risk to the school community. Number one, masks and or cloth face coverings may be required for students, staff, contracted providers, and third parties in order to access school buildings, grounds, and school buses. This says may because our status level and our safety protocols will change based on the conditions. And so there will be times that I will require it and other times where I won't require it based on the conditions. No person, including a student, shall be required to wear a mask if their disability or a medical condition prevents them from doing such. And we're establishing a procedure to vet those requests through our school nurses to ensure that those are appropriate. Staff who work with deaf students or hard of hearing students, students learning to read, and students who rely on lip reading shall wear clear masks, which enhance service provision. 4, the district shall endeavor to maintain a supply of masks for students and staff who do not have access to a mask or a cloth face covering. We're working with the state to also procure all the things that we need. We will ask staff and students to provide their own PPE when possible, but we're happy to provide it when they do not. The superintendent shall provide appropriate notification to all school staff, students, parents, and school board members when a requirement regarding the use of masks and or face coverings is implemented, altered, or eliminated. Meaning I'm going to let folks know so you have plenty of time to plan for it. Next, the superintendent or his or her designee with input from the building nurse will establish mask and or face covering definitions, style guidelines, and efficacy requirements based on CDC and New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services and other appropriate guidelines. Meaning we'll make sure that people know what counts as a mask or a cloth face covering and what does not. And then we'll notify folks via our websites or electronic media about the changes in the policy. Continuing, Any student who refuses to abide by the established directives shall be deemed a health hazard to themselves and others. They shall be removed from the school building, and their parent or guardian shall be contacted and required to take their child unless and until such time as they're willing to comply with the face mask or cloth covering requirement. Next, moving on to the testing notification requirement. Due to the district's desire to notify parents and staff when a member of the school community has been in contact with someone who has tested positive for COVID-19, parents, adult students, which are students over the age of 18, and staff are required to notify the school via the school nurse when the staff member, adult student, or a parent's child, not the parent, has been tested for COVID-19, and in addition, the results of the COVID-19 test within 24 hours of receipt of the test results. To the extent possible, all medical information, including a positive test result, will be kept confidential by the school district, but will form the basis of a notification to other students or staff who may have come in contact with the person who tested positive for COVID-19. The district shall only release personally identifiable student information or the identity of a positive student when it is required to do so by state law or deems such to be necessary under the Health and Safety Emergency exception for the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act in order to protect the health or safety of the student or others. In addition to these policies, there are 3 others that need modification during this time. First, athletic handbooks can be amended to allow parents to transport their children to and from athletic events. Policy KF is amended to restrict the use of school facilities during this time based on my discretion. And policy KI is amended to restrict access to the school facilities by visitors based on my discretion as well. And I will tell you that for the most part this school year, our schools will not be accessible to visitors. This is a temporary policy based on a health emergency. It shall remain in place until such time as the governor rescinds his emergency order, modifies it, or the board determines that there is no longer substantial risk that unmasked persons will present a hazard to themselves or others in the school setting, whichever event is the latter. The board shall review this policy every quarter to determine whether it remains appropriate, and the superintendent shall update the school boards quarterly on the implementation of this policy. Let's see. So that's our policy changes for this evening that we're recommending. Next, I'm going to ask Deanna Quartz, one of our school nurses, who's been instrumental in development of this plan, to spend a few minutes talking about the parent responsibilities, nurse protocols, and how contact tracing and notifications might go. Deanna, you're up.
Hi. So first, I'm going to cover what we're hoping parents, we want to work together with parents. We need to work together to get this to work out well. We're asking parents, when you fill out your enrollment forms online in the medical area, please include any pre-existing conditions that may cause some of the same symptoms of COVID-19 that could help us when we're trying to assess a child for symptoms if they're not feeling well. We're also asking parents to screen their children daily at home prior to sending them to school. These are the following things we're asking for. Please do a temperature check. If it's greater than 100, do not send your child to school. If there's any complaints of chills, headache, gastrointestinal symptoms such as nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, or stomach ache, upper respiratory symptoms that include cough, sore throat, runny nose, shortness of breath, excessive fatigue, not just from staying up late at night, but above and beyond that, body aches, new loss of taste or smell, known exposure to someone that's COVID-19 positive, or recent travel outside of the United States, and I'll get to that part later. But if there's a yes to any of those questions, the child must stay home, you must call your primary care provider, and they need to be tested. If they're tested, I'll get back to that. Let me finish going. Staff is going to have to do the same thing as well, and staff will have to fill a questionnaire out at school and also a temperature check. We're asking if any of your students require medications at home in the morning, please take them at home. Don't have us give it to them at school. We're trying to keep the traffic in the health office and the hallways to a minimum. One other recommendation we have is for parents to please have your students practice wearing their masks now. Don't send them first day of school getting on the bus and then at school with masks if they haven't tried wearing them ahead of time. there's different styles of mask that kids might like. They might like a fun pattern. We're just asking the requirement for masks to be a cloth mask that covers their nose and mouth. Have them pick a pattern they like. They're going to be more encouraged to wear it. One idea that I've heard is if you want to try to get your child to get used to wearing a mask is they can only use their video game while they're wearing a mask. So they may tolerate better if they're doing something they enjoy, and they may get used to it a little bit better. For nursing procedures, we're asking teachers to call the health office if they have a student that needs to be seen by the nurse rather than sending them to the health office, and the nurse will come to assess that child. We want to keep, like I said, hallway traffic to a minimum, so that can help with that. Nurses will also bring any scheduled medications that we have to give to the student's classroom. We'll pull the child into the hallway to give them medications so that there is some privacy as well. If a child presents to us at school with any of the above symptoms that any of the symptoms I talked about that we're asking you to assess at home, they are going to be dismissed, because we are being told by the state of New Hampshire that even for mild symptoms, because children often have very mild symptoms and they're COVID positive, that we are to send the child home. Once a child or a staff member is dismissed to their parent, we're asking the primary care provider to be called and for them to have a COVID-19 test. If the student comes back, has a negative test, they can come back to school, but they need to stay home till we get a test that's negative. If they choose not to be tested, they're required to be home for 10 days, quarantine 10 days after that dismissal. If they have a test that's positive, they're also required to be home the 10 days. So if you test and you're positive, or you choose not to test, you're home 10 days. It's a 10-to-1 rule. The one meaning the last 24 hours, they've been symptom-free, and then they could return to school. This is per the New Hampshire Public Health Department guidelines. There also are some cases where a sibling from the same household may be dismissed if they will be dismissed if the child's COVID positive, but it depends on the symptoms. In the event of dismissal, we're asking parents to call the school from their car, and the child will be escorted to the front for dismissal rather than have parents enter the building. We're also asking parents at orientation or enrollment time, there'll be a questionnaire listed, and all of these guidelines are listed, and we're asking people to sign off that they understand this and acknowledge this, so that when they're called, they know that we're calling them because of state guidelines, and they'll come pick up their child, and it won't be a difficult time for us. I've had a couple questions in the chat room regarding testing. Testing is not recommended just as a screening tool. And the reason for this is because there's up to 2 weeks is incubation period. So let's say I went for a test today. I'd have to wait for the results first of all, but it would only test whether I was positive at that moment I got the test. If I was still incubating the virus, it could take up to 14 days to show symptoms. So I might not show positive until I start some symptoms. So it's not an accurate way of screening out people for COVID to come to the school. And then the last area I wanted to talk about, contact tracing and notifications. We are being told by the Department of Health and Human Services, the nurses have been on every Friday, have a meeting with the New Hampshire Public Health Department, just so you know, and they're giving us recommendations every week. We're being told that if someone has positive COVID, it's a reportable disease. It's mandatory reporting to the state. The state will contact the nurse at the school, and we will help with contact tracing, but they will do the main tracing, but we're going to help out because we can say who was near that child or staff member. And that people would be quarantined based on the information they get for that, and they will help with notifications too. It's not just going to be the school, but it will be the state. So we may not be able to give out who the specific person is due to confidentiality, but you would know that hopefully that whether you need to be quarantined or not. And the whole idea of the pods is to keep it to a minimum if that was the case. The criteria for quarantining, they're saying, is within 6 feet of the person for 10 minutes or more. So that's what we're being told. So I'll answer questions later on, but that's all I have for now.
Deanna, thank you so much, and thank you for all you've been doing to help us prepare this plan. Much appreciated, for sure. Next, I'd like Roger Preston, who's our Director of Facilities. He's going to speak about our cleaning protocols and how that will work in our schools. Roger.
Thank you. So we've been working very closely starting up to these last couple of weeks on our cleaning protocols with our chemical provider. Weekly, we hold facilities meetings with all of our staff, and that this past meeting, we actually invited our chemical provider to go over all of disinfecting, cleaning common areas, cleaning CAFs, cleaning hallways. And we're also working along with Deanna and all of our nurses to make sure that the protocols that we have in place are meeting their needs as well. We're working with the athletic directors to find cleaning of athletic equipment. And we're really developing just strict protocols, just meaning that we have guides that we're going to provide to all the custodians. Our chemical provider also provides training and certificates. It provides tracking as well, that just for all of our custodians and school nurses to provide information and just understands the importance of cleaning within our buildings. Frequencies we're also going to be developing with all of our principals, just finding we know that we're going to need to hit the touch points more, making sure that our schools are empty at night so that we're able to move about them freely and effectively. Ideally, cleaning protocols are just very important to us, which we're going to be defining and working with administration and our school nurses to make sure that we're providing a good environment for everyone that's within our buildings.
Roger, thank you very much. Much appreciated. I know there's a lot more to it than that, but I appreciate that overview very much. Moving on through our presentation. So next we have to talk about the money. The plans that we have, again, the objective is for our students to safely advance a year of school this year. It takes some real money to make this happen. And I'm going to break these things down a little bit tonight and a lot more next week with the individual board meetings. But in general terms, we have resources broken down in 3 categories: immediate needs for supplies, personnel, equipment, etc. Short-term HVAC upgrades to improve our air quality within our schools, and then the long-term HVAC upgrades that have been a part of our capital maintenance plan that I'm going to suggest we move forward and work towards implementing very quickly. So in those 3 categories, broken down by district, you can see the impacts of this particular plan. It is true that we're being conservative, meaning our numbers are definitely on the high side for each of these things, but with all things in school finance, we can't spend $1 more than is appropriated. And so our numbers have to be on the high side, and then for us to be aggressive in spending less along the way so we can return to taxpayers. But these numbers are not small numbers, and I want to break these down a little bit for you. The non-HVAC things. So the cost for professional development for our teachers. In all 3 of our districts, we have grant funding available. That grant funding covers all of the costs for professional development in Mount Vernon and Sauhegan, and most of it in Amherst, but not quite all of it. Our expenses for PPE for staff and students for extra things, as well as important partitions and all sorts of various things that are built into the school level plans are listed there. We have some staffing requests in various places. To make our plan work, we need a combination of long-term subs, custodial support, etc., to make sure that all of our plans work, that our plans can function and limit the mixing of students within the building. In some of our schools, we need some very minor furniture. In some places, we have tables where 4 students sit very closely. That's not going to work in this environment. So we need to replace with some standing desks and other sorts of things to make that possible. And then supplies for cleaning and or storage that are unique this year, including the leasing of UV robots to do cleaning at night in all of our classrooms via UV, which is known to be the gold standard. Roger, I'm going to turn it back to you now if I could, to talk more about HVAC. Our HVAC plans this evening is just going to be a very high level overview, but Roger, and we have an architect and our engineer on here as well, if the board has any specific questions. But again, I'd like to hold as many of those to the individual board meetings and for this just to be an overview. But what I want to stress is We're doing the short-term things now that we can do relatively inexpensively. And then the long-term improvements are all about what we'd already planned to do in the past through our capital maintenance plan over the next 20 years, that we're saying instead we should accelerate that work and do it right away because of the conditions we have and the prospect of us being in this for many years to come. And then finally, this is all got to tie into our Joint Facilities Advisory Committee, whatever's going to happen in Amherst regarding Wilkins. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Roger to walk through our HVAC plans. Roger.
Thank you. And also thank you to Bill and Lance, who we have on the line. I know we've had many meetings about this and a lot of calls from me as well. And also thank you to the members of the community that have reached out to me right up until right before this meeting. There's a lot of good information out there, and I believe we hit it in some of our short and long-term goals here. So really outlined for our short and long-term goals, we're looking about 7 options for every building throughout our districts. Some of these options we're actually proposing and some of them we're not. The options that we're not proposing, we wanted to leave it on here because we just wanted to provide information saying that we've looked into all of our options and really done our due diligence. An overview of these 7 options is we're looking to provide more fresh air into our buildings. As superintendent has mentioned many times, is in the summertime, it's easy with opening up our windows, but as we get into these fall and winter months, we really need to be changing our air over multiple times. Really, ideally, about 6 times per hour is adequate, but information that I've been reading up to this meeting here also says that between 9 changes per hour is adequate as well. Also trying to lower our CO levels within our buildings. There's information out there that says under 600 parts per million with occupants in our rooms is a good standard to keep to help reduce transmission. Option 2, we're also looking into upgrading our filters. With discussions with Lance and Bill, I've found that some districts don't even carry filters in their buildings, and I can say that we are not one of them, which is great. Currently, we're running a MERV 8 standard, and we're looking to upgrade our filters either to a MERV 11 or a MERV 13. MERV 11 or a MERV 13 filters is just going to grab more particulates out of the air and just provide a better air environment. We got to use caution on that, though, is the more we restrict our airflow, we have to, our thicker filter will actually restrict our airflow, so we just have to use caution to make sure that those filters are working. Other option is that we're looking at full replacement of our HVAC units to include UV lights and include those upgraded MERV filters. We've also looked into adding UV lights to our existing units here, which we're finding is not an option that we support, but we left it on there because it is an option that it is an option. We've looked into bipolar ionization in our units, adapting that to our units. We've been just air of a side of caution there, just making sure that we're installing the right equipment, and we're not too sure that that type of installation is proper for the environment that we're in. We're also looking into installing HEPA filters for rooms that don't have airflow. A good example of that is our portables that we have at Wilkins. Although they have just a window shaker air conditioner, they just provide natural gas heat. We're actually not getting any airflow in that. So a HEPA filter there and at our SAU building would be a good option. Installing UV direct lights in each classroom, that is certainly a new option there, but considering we're looking at UV robots, that probably isn't an option that we'd be looking into with having the UV robots. So ideally, these are the 7 options that we're looking at for all of our buildings. We provide our recommendations. We've also provided the list of pros and cons there for all of the units. One thing is to consider is our Clark School that I'll bring up is one that I just want to touch upon. Is we are not recommending replacing all of the units at Clark, as we don't potentially feel that we would use that as a school building. We do feel that it would be a good site for the town if they needed it for a community center or some other option like that. So although it might not work for a school, it is a good option for a community center. And pretty much that is an overview of all of the options we're looking at to have at our buildings and our recommendations as well. And I will say, Lance or Bill, do you feel that you would like to add anything since we have you on the line?
I think you covered it well, Roger.
Looks like I might get out of the basement.
I vote yes. Well done.
Thanks,
Thank
Roger.
you.
Much appreciated. Moving along, we're near the end here, folks. Funding sources. To pay for these things, we have three real options. The first is a very obvious one, reprioritizing our existing budget. We've already done that. We've frozen our budget for non-essential purchases already, starting right away at the beginning of the fiscal year, July 1. We also have some savings from our health insurance rates that were lower than what we budgeted. But in general, our existing budget will not cover the expenses that we expect to arise during this coming school year in order to implement this plan. There is some federal and state grant money available that we will certainly tap into and use as much as possible. But really the primary funding source has to be a special school district meeting. A special district meeting is a legal term, whereas there would be a budget hearing, a deliberative session, and an election day in person with ballots, just like we do every January, February, and March for the annual school district meeting. A special district meeting has that process happen out of sync and out of that sequence, but is needed for us in order to make this happen. So my recommendation is that each board authorizes an emergency district meeting for the short-term expenditures needed for this year to operate the schools safely. All three districts need to do that because all three have expenditures beyond what we have available to us. In all of our school districts, we also have the ability to use, through a special district meeting, any of the unassigned fund balances from this past school year. Unassigned fund balances are the amount of money that we didn't spend with last year's budget. Those funds are available, but only through the special meeting process to be able to be used. And then any additional funds would need to be raised on top of that. For Amherst and Sauhegan, I'm recommending that the boards attempt a bond issue to fund the long-term HVAC upgrades immediately. We need to add air conditioning, UV filtering, and meet new construction building code for fresh air requirements. And I suggest we do that right away. It will take us some time to get those units installed, but we know that many, many school districts around the country are going to be doing this. And the sooner that we can get in line, the sooner we'll be able to have those systems online, because I expect there to be a significant backlog. For Mount Vernon, I'm suggesting that we repurpose our capital reserve fund. We've been setting money aside for many years for an upcoming roof replacement. We think the roof is in decent shape. A higher priority right now is to do those HVAC upgrades near term and avoid the need for a bond issue for Mount Vernon. We'll need to replace those roof funds over the next couple of years in preparation for that roof replacement, but that might avoid a significant expense on the Mount Vernon side. With that, I'm ready to turn it over to the building level plans. Again, I can't stress this enough, that tonight is not meant to go deep into the detailed ins and outs of these plans, but to give an overview from our principals, to give to give members of our public a sense of what the plans will be. Many more questions will be answered in the following 2 days at the parent information nights. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael Berry, principal of Sauhegan High School. Michael.
Thanks, Adam. So appreciate the opportunity to kind of briefly go over our plan. As mentioned throughout the evening, a lot of time went into it, and we certainly will be answering specific and detailed questions tomorrow and throughout the week from staff, students, families, and other community members that have questions about how we're reopening Sauhegan High School. We will, maintain to the mission statement and make sure that the experience at Sauhegan is as close to the experience that we can make it during the 2021 school year. But I do have to emphasize that this school year is going to look different, as we all know, and there's going to be a great deal of compromise and cooperation and sacrifice in order for this plan to actually happen and happen with fidelity. And the students are probably going to be the ones who have to change their approach to school and how they access the campus at Sauhegan. I don't want to minimize that. I'm really excited that we have this opportunity. I feel the plan is sustainable. I feel it's very, adaptable. It doesn't really matter if you're going to be remote or in person. We're going to work with students to achieve the year's worth of growth. And we have a plan that I think people will find, something where they can access and use it to meet their needs as a student and a family. And so I want to emphasize that it is going to be individualized and personalized as you navigate this year, but there will be some compromise and sacrifice. Our focus is what you'll see of everyone else, the health and well-being, everyone. That is the primary piece. If I've talked or answered any emails, hopefully you've felt this message. And we certainly want to make sure that our seniors have the best year that they can possibly have given the circumstances. But it's not limited just to seniors. We want to make sure that the 11th graders have access to all their classes that they had planned. We want the 10th graders to stay on course and have a good second year and maintain their path to graduation. And we want the 9th graders to transition as seamlessly as we possibly can. So our plan focuses a bit on the adults and interactions with students and the choice that we are giving within the structure of this. As mentioned throughout this process, we are going into a gold and black day throughout the week. Our Wednesdays are going to be what we're calling independent learning and support days. This is a work day. This is not a flex day. So if you're referring to it as a flex day, I need you to change your language. This is not a flex day. This is not what it looks like from the spring. This is a day where, teachers and staff are going to be working with students, whether they are, remote learning or they are coming to access the building. This day what we think can be a really powerful day, a really good experience for a variety of different types of learners and students on this particular day. It has lots of options, so we can make sure that we are giving the educational experience to our students that they deserve. More information about Wednesdays, but we're really excited about this day. But please do not refer to it as a flex day. It is a work day, and it is a work day for staff, and it is a work day for students. One of the emphasis that we want to try to control throughout our plan is limiting the number of people in the building at a certain time. So the most substantial change was this. We are going to stagger the start of the day. And if you noticed, you have 9th graders. They don't necessarily have to arrive on campus at 7:25. We're looking for 10th graders to arrive on campus at 7:25. If you need to access the campus as a 9th grader, you absolutely can, and we will have a place where you will be able to work and interact with your device and be at school, because that's where you need to be and that works for your family. The other piece of this plan that is going to be probably vastly different from the high school experiences, we are going to allow students to manage the building, so to come and go throughout the building as they need. We're going to ask them to identify as an in-person student or a remote learner, but as people try to access the building, depending on what classes they have, they are going to be able to, in cooperation with the school and their parents and guardians, to manage what their days look like. And so you might have 11th and 12th graders on campus for 2 classes, and they might not be on campus for the rest of the day. You might have 10th graders who are in that, well, not as many. You might have 9th graders in that. It all depends on how we can be flexible for the students and the teachers. For us, we're going to utilize Google Classroom. We're going to use a tool off of PowerSchool called eCollect, where we can manage the students accessing the building. So that is how we're going to manage the people coming and going. A lot of us at the school, in order to make this happen, we had to change the master schedule dramatically. And the delay in schedules, I have to admit, no one wanted the schedules to go out in mid-August. We all wanted the schedules to go out. But in order to maintain safety, develop a plan that works, to make it something that is sustainable, not just in September, but this plan is still sustainable in February, and it can be flexible enough to adhere to whatever code that SAU 39 decides that they're going to implement. So that is really important for people to know. I apologize for the delay. The schedules will be released this week. Please look for emails regarding that and some information on social media outlets. And between this evening and tomorrow evening and the schedule and any questions that you have throughout the week, we will work with you as you decide what is going to be best for the students and as you declare as a family what you want your high school student to be scheduled for. This is just a quick little example of what it's going to look like as an on-campus learner in a yellow status and a remote learner in any color. And you will have more information with that tomorrow. Thank you. And as of August 10th, we will know more information as people declare, that is staff and students. At this point, we're not able to get into some of the logistics of how the building's going to flow until we know who is going to be in the building and when. And so as we get that information, we will make those determinations and we will communicate to the students and the families and the staff of Souhegan High School. And as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at mberry@sau39, and we'll be back in touch. And looking forward tomorrow, and we'll make sure we will send out the invite for tomorrow's meeting as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. Next up from the Mount Vernon Village School, the pride of Mount Vernon, Kim Sarfty. Kim.
There we go. We have been working really hard at the Mount Vernon Village School. All of the staff members have been really amazing. I am a one-person leadership team, and all of the staff members have really stepped up to collaborate and to create a great plan that we have before you tonight. So we're excited to share that with you. So again, our goals are aligned with the district's goals. First and foremost, we want everybody to be safe. We also want children to be comfortable in our school. A lot of parents have expressed a concern that they want their school year to be as uninterrupted or as with few disruptions as possible. And so that's kind of the environment that we try to create at Mount Vernon. We certainly want to make sure that every student makes at least a year of academic growth. And we know that in order to make that happen, we have to be flexible and we have to be really creative, which is something that I think is a strength for our school and for our staff members. And most importantly, we want kids to be really excited to come into our building. So certainly we are going to, just like all of the other schools, safety is paramount, and we are going to create a fun culture of mask wearing. Tonight I have my Mickey and Minnie Patriots mask on. I know lots of our teachers have been getting some really adorable masks that kids will love to see, and it's just going to be part of the culture. So our school hours are uninterrupted. Everything has pretty much stayed the same with regard to the time frames. We have one start time, we have one end time. We have a regular bus schedule. We'll have 3 buses that transport our students. There is a little bit of a change when it comes to where the buses will be dropping students off. I think in the past, buses went to the exterior door of the building, and this year they're actually going to be coming around the front. I actually worked with our admin assistants today, and we created some videos, so those will be posted very soon, but just to show the new bus route. And then also parent drop-off will now be behind the building where the buses used to go. And we're going to be utilizing that exterior, the rear exterior door for students who are being dropped off and picked up to come in and out of. And then we will limit the flow of traffic coming through the main door, and that will be where the students who are busing arrive and where they're dismissed from. And yeah, we have all hands on deck during arrival and dismissal. We are currently creating assignments to make sure that adults are able to assist students and direct them to their classrooms so that there is minimal time where students are kind of standing around and in lines. We want really to eliminate lines as much as possible. And again, I'm working on those videos right now, so they're forthcoming. So for the most part, all of our classroom teachers, we try to accommodate all of the teachers with regard to their preferences, either remote or in person. And all of the classroom teachers have elected to teach in person at this point. So they will be teaching their normal grade level assignment. When it comes to that redundancy aspect and when it comes to making sure that we are prepared for any situation, we are preparing to keep kids in grade level bands, K2, 3, 4, and 5, 6. However, primarily kids, especially K through 4, will be in their self-contained classroom with their one teacher, just like a typical school year. And then grades 5 and 6, the teachers are they're not self-contained. Students will be switching between different, they'll be switching teachers. The students will not be switching classrooms. Actually, we'll have teachers move into different classrooms based on their content. Our intervention block is going to be changed a little bit. It's going to be called Win Now, and that is really going to be comprised of remediation and enrichment based on whatever the individual student's needs are. And one of the reasons why we wanted to change our intervention block and really make sure that we focus on high achieving learners as well as those who need a little bit of an extra help is because we want to be able to sustain high achievement and high growth. I actually spoke with a mom today, and that was one of her great concerns, and that's a concern that I understand, I appreciate, and it's something that we're looking forward to addressing. We certainly want to at the same time meet our learners who are lower achieving and who are struggling a little bit. We want to be able to meet them where they are, and we want to be able to diagnose what's going on and then move them forward. So we'll be utilizing that win time for that. And I guess the other thing I would say is with regard to win, there is a little bit of flexibility within the grade bands so that if we do have students who are ready for some vertical acceleration, or we have some students who, when they're working on a specific skill or targeting a standard that actually that was actually prerequisite learning from a previous grade level, there is some flexibility of some movement between those grade bands when it comes to that what I need block. So in terms of special education, our special educators are amazing. We have 3 of them, and they have been in contact with me quite a bit, and essentially they're going to be the only people in the building who are going to have to tackle both in person and remote, and they're amazing and they are up for the challenge. We're actually meeting again tomorrow with our special ed director, and we're going to tackle any questions. We're going to address any questions that our parents have. The questions have been coming in to me every single day, and I've been working to make sure that I get the answers that parents are looking for, but we will be absolutely sure to meet the needs of all of our students who are on IEPs, who are on 504s, whether it be remote or in person. So our anchoring adults will probably primarily be or mostly be the classroom teachers. We also have any other adult in the building who has formed a meaningful relationship with students. So I think when it comes to deciding which anchoring adults will be assigned to individual students, I think that'll probably be more of a staff discussion. I know that lots of teachers have formed relationships with students, and they probably want to be assigned as an anchoring adult to those students. And so I think, and I'm sure it's something that's a mutual relationship, and the students probably want that as well. So I think that, again, we'll have more of a discussion as a staff, and we'll be able to figure out which anchoring adult will be best assigned to individual students. So this is a sample of our in-person schedule, and you'll notice that so it's grade 3 and grade 4, and you'll notice that there is a grade 3A and a grade 3B, grade 4A and a grade 4B. And we have a total of 2 classrooms for each grade level. And what we tried to do is we tried to make sure that the intervention block, that wind block between the grade bands is consistent, so there can be a little bit of flexibility and movement in that with regard to paraprofessionals working with students, with regard to special educators working with students, and with regard to, again, a little bit of movement between students within those grade bands. Grades K through 3, again, they're in self-contained, the students are in self-contained classrooms, so that one teacher will teach all of the content areas. But you'll notice from grade 4 and up, we have content-specific teachers, and so instead of breaking things up between like math and science and language arts, we have more of like a STEM and humanities approach, and we're actually going to be doing that. We're actually going to be doing that kind of across the board, really K through 6, and we'll be doing that remote as well. I know some parents were interested in a very detailed remote learning schedule, and I will tell you that that has been developed, and that is actually in our building level plans, and that schedule will be shared with parents on Wednesday for the parent information night. But yep, we absolutely do. I actually created a schedule, and then I met with the teachers who will be teaching remotely, and they gave me their feedback, and we actually scrapped my schedule all together, and we went with the schedule that we think best meets the needs of everybody who will be learning remotely. So that is coming. And then when it comes to outdoor learning spaces, yeah. So our IT department is going to be working diligently, making sure that we have connections outside. Thankfully, we have exterior classroom doors. Almost every one of our classrooms has an exterior door. So we made sure that we got keys for all of our staff members so that they can go in and out of those doors as you know, as they want to and as they see fit with regard to mask breaks and with regard to our just the outdoor area and being able to utilize that area for outdoor learning. I have talked to our PTA and they are absolutely amazing. We have talked about some setting up some shady areas, and we've also talked about flexible seating options. And so there's certainly more to come on that, but we are planning to utilize that outdoor space as much as possible. We're lucky that we only have 205 students and we have an abundance of space.
Thank you, Kim. Next, we have an update from Clark Wilkins School and Principal Anna Perrell. Anna.
Thanks, Adam. So on this first slide, maybe if we could just stay here just for a second, just to be able to talk a little bit about our overall goals. And what I would say right off, you know, what we want parents to hear is just our love for your children and the depth of social emotional support that we are thinking about as we're going into this. And as everybody else said, our number one concern is safety. Next, a robust instruction, and third, flexibility and creativity. So I think that you will see that with the plan that we are putting forward. Right now, what I would say is we sent out to all the parents at Clark Wilkins I think it's a 15-page document with videos, screencastify information. So I would say before tomorrow night's 4 o'clock presentation, I would highly encourage you to go on, watch the videos, go through all the information, and we feel that that will be very helpful to answer some of your questions prior to. So next slide right off is our pod structure. I think that's our new terminology that you will hear everywhere. And what that means is in a pod, everyone is assigned a homeroom, approximately 10 to 15 students. In that homeroom teacher is going to be our anchoring adult. Each homeroom is made up, each pod is made up of 3 teachers comprised of approximately 30 to 45 students. Again, that's just on the data we've had in the past, but certainly we're looking forward this Friday to have the actual numbers. All instruction, all interventions, all extensions are going to happen within this pod. So within a pod, no students will be mixing outside of the pod. Next up, you can see on the slide, this just gives a quick snapshot of the different grade levels, and you can see the different pods, 3 teachers with a paraprofessional, and the numbers per the grade level is kind of the breakdown there. So next slide kind of goes with that. What we find is going to be a very robust in-person schedule for that. It allows flexibilities. Yes, we're following the same structure, but during small groups, there could be small groups for interventions, extensions, small group for social emotional time. So just that flexibility really to meet kids where they are. So when people ask about really bridging that gap of lost instructional time and really allowing that flexibility for what kids need in the moment. You'll see a little bit of a change in specials. It's listing a 15-minute special, and that's a synchronous special, and that's whether you're in person or remote. And then we're looking for asynchronous after students go home, so there's an opportunity for extending the specials. With the next slide, you're also going to see that we are adjusting our start time. So that is the reason for the change in the specialists. Something I forgot to add on the last slide, you don't need to move it back, but is that all materials and supplies for specials and for students in school or remotely, we will be able to provide to parents. So if you're taking a look at this slide, I would say I could probably spend 20 minutes, which I'm not going to do because I think there are some great videos that are describing a pretty significant change in our arrival and dismissal times, procedures for both Clark and Wilkins. We're doing this, one, because of safety, for not having congregation in any of our areas. So we will review that again tomorrow night, but if you take a look at the videos prior to, I think it'll give you a good idea of really us thinking about kids entering from all different doors, all different locations, so that we don't have hundreds or even groups of 50 or more students entering into any location. All right. Also with the daily from when the students get here, we are having the common planning time for teachers, and what that is going to allow is for common planning time, not just with the in-person teachers, but also the remote. So we have really deep conversations about instruction, about pacing, so that everybody is on the same page and are having a similar instructional opportunities for our kids. Next up is lunch recess. Again, with a pod structure, lunches will be in the classrooms. We still have our lunch recess monitors and pairs that will be able to help deliver lunches to the students. So at this point in time, we were not having volunteers in the building. The flexibility of the pod structure is that teachers, where it fits best in their schedule, can have lunch in the times that best fit. And we are going to have students also helping with their own cleaning of their own desk prior to heading outside for recess, and ample opportunity for hand washing and antibacterial. Recess, we have recess within the pods. And we have 3 separate recess times. We have 3 separate locations that will allow for flexibility and movement outside. Also, not having to wear a mask at recess in order to be able to have that break in the opportunity and still be distanced. And I believe we're on the next slide. So remote learning, right at the present time, we have 1 teacher designated for grades 1 through 4. All students that are in remote learning will receive their special education services remotely. Remote or in-person specials, they will have the same opportunities to participate in the same blocks. Detailed grade level schedules are listed on our logistics document, so for every single grade. And Kathleen Murphy did an incredible job on the screen Castify that can take you detailed through each one of these blocks, what it means, and those opportunities. We also have heard from parents just that need for social emotional connection, for that climate and community building. So there's going to be opportunities during remote, because we know that that is just a piece that is vital to the success for students in both of those areas. So I think that that kind of encapsulates everything. I really look forward to all parents being able to join us tomorrow at 4. And again, if you take a look at that logistics document, hopefully it's able to put at ease some of the questions and the concerns that you might have prior to tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Anna. Finally, our Amherst Middle School principal, Dr. Bethany Bernasconi. Bethany.
Thank you. Am I unmuted? Great. So thank you everyone for being a part of this process and allowing us to share out our building level plans tonight. Again, as my colleagues have stated, I'm going to stay really high level. There's a detailed document that is part of the SAU 39 document that links to our building level one for families to check out. And we will also be sending that out tomorrow directly to your email or however you receive your Nixle messages, along with information again about our parent night, which is happening on Wednesday. So, so again, these are just highlighting the foundations that are the same, that are aligned with the SAU 39 plan. I'm going to go a little quick through some of these so I can get to a little bit more detail. So the SAU 39 foundations really building a year's worth of growth, really making sure we're taking care of the health and safety needs. The middle school is addressing in a few different ways. So first, our anchoring adults are set up through our launch pad and morning meeting. Morning meeting is what will happen in 5th grade, and it's really a bridge between the elementary school and the middle school, and will help transition our students and welcome our new 5th graders into the building. Launchpad is what our AMS advisory is, and that's going to take place in grades 6 through 8. These will serve as our anchoring adults and really help to build a consistent relationship throughout the year for students. We know things are going to change. We know student choices might change segment to segment. And we want to make sure that there's a connected adult that can act as a point person for them. And again, we'll go into much more of these details during our parent night. Key to our plan is our teacher teams. So our teacher teams are building in that redundancy and flexibility within our grade levels. So teacher teams are composed in 5th and 6th grade of all of the STEM teachers that were in that grade level, plus an additional staff member. Same thing for humanities. In our 7th and 8th grade, our teacher teams are our 7th and 8th grade teachers, also being supplemented with the additional staff members, interventionists, and certified teachers in those content areas, pushing in to teach in those different content areas in each of the grade levels. Those teacher teams are going to work really closely together. They have common planning, and that was a key part of our schedule. Both remote and in-person teachers will have that common planning, collaboration time, so that we can make sure that our in-person experience and our remote experience is near seamless with one another, and really allow students to flex in and out as they might need to do so over the course of the year. They'll be working on common assessments, both formative and summative, and following the same curriculum, using similar, if not the same, Google Classrooms. All of that meant to be a really unifying presence over the course of this year. And this also helps us with the addition of those extra teachers into each of these teams to keep our class sizes a little bit smaller, so we can support that health and safety and also not overwhelm a remote teacher with too large class numbers. Key to our changes as well as our schedule modifications, and I'm going to ask Adam to skip ahead to our schedule slide. One more, perfect. So, nope, go back one. So just some key guiding principles. This is a big change for us, but this is really how we're tackling both common planning, collaboration, limiting movement through the building. This is really kind of the anchor point for this. So it was important for us to build a common schedule across the building and really preserve that planning and prep time. We're asking teachers to do a lot more, and we need to make sure that we're giving them the tools and the time to do that and do it well. One of the big pieces of feedback from the spring was that we needed to simplify our schedule so that it was easier for students to really deeply engage with the work they were doing on, rather than jumping from content to content area and being on, too many Zooms over the course of the day, but to really simplify this. And that was feedback from both our staff, faculty and our staff and our families. We think it's really important that we need to preserve time for interventions, enrichment, and extra help, and that's really the core of our Eagle block, making sure that we meet every student where they are and recognizing that students change from day to day and their needs change from day to day. So making sure that we can provide the real-time support or real-time enrichment opportunities for students on a day-to-day. And part of our goal with this is to really empower our students to create some plans and to help design that time together. We also made sure that we maintain time for connections and social emotional learning. Again, that launchpad and morning meeting time is going to be invaluable for this. And that we have and are making sure that we're providing a robust remote or robust experience for our integrated arts programs. We know that the arts are really important for adolescent development, for exposure for our students, and wanting to make sure that our students don't miss out on that. So in our schedule, you'll notice, and again, the detailed schedules are in our building plan documents, that each grade level has a day dedicated to integrated arts. So it's a modified block schedule, which limits movement across the day. Our 5th and 6th grade students are with either their STEM teacher or their humanities teacher for the entire day. And that really allows those teachers flexibility in providing math breaks and getting creative with the curriculum and meeting the needs of those students, and limits transitions through the day. For our 7th and 8th graders, they have 2 core subject areas a day. So they'll either be with their English and then their social studies class later in the day, or a math class in the morning and a science class in the afternoon, that sort of thing. They're longer blocks of time, which allows teachers to go deeper, but it also builds in time for math breaks, for getting students outside to move in different areas of the building and take advantage of our outdoor classrooms as well. Last but not least, the midday break allows us to have what we're calling a smart lunch. So we really want to build in breaks and screen-free time for our students. So that smart lunch is an hour-and-a-half block of time. Essentially 45 minutes of it will be lunch and recess. So if your students are like mine and they finish lunch in 10 minutes, they'll have a little bit more time. If they need more time to eat and really want to do that, they'll have that as well. So we'll have that kind of 45-minute block of time set aside for that. And then the additional 45-minute block of time in there is a directed study. Our directed study is a way to supplement our instructional activities with other really important skills and foundational activities to make up for some of the time that we're losing during this remote year. So for example, we've prescribed that students 3 days a week will do 20 minutes of Dreambox math, and there's a linking study with NIWA showing that 60 minutes of Dreambox math a week results in significant achievement and growth. So we looked for those high leverage strategies that we could put into this time to help support student growth as well. And it's also during that time that our teachers will have a duty-free lunch, which was also really critical here. That's just a quick look at what the overall daily schedule looks like. Again, I don't want to dwell too much here, but this is in our building documents for you to look at in more depth, and we'll talk through this more in our parent meeting on Wednesday. And again, just a quick view, our 7th and 8th grade, very similar. Flip one more. I do want to spend a moment here talking about remote learning. So there's been a lot of questions about what a remote learning structure. And again, I think we've learned a lot from the spring and have really tried to implement the feedback from the spring. So both our online and on-campus students are going to follow the same schedule, same curriculum. And again, that's why that common planning was so important there. Attendance will be taken for our online classes, just like as if students were in school. Google Classroom is going to be that primary mechanism of communication there. So online students are going to be assigned a teacher at the beginning of each segment. That teacher is going to reach out and communicate with the family and communicate with the student to let them know, to welcome them, to get them set up in their Google Classroom if they made a switch. And it's going to be really important. And our first segment is really designed to help students get to know all of the teachers and teacher teams and really build those relationships, because they might flex between different teachers from segment to segment. Just a quick look at what that block of time might look like. I know we've had lots of questions about how much time might they be on screens, what will this be like for a remote learner. So for example, in our core structures, so let's just take an English class, for example. So each core would begin with synchronous student interactions. That could be welcome messages, it could be warm-ups, it could be some direct instruction, it could be a conversation about the reading or something that the students had worked on before. Then students will move into a practice or an activity or some kind of assessment. that might be on the screen, that might be off the screen. It could be individual or it could be collaborative. We know that collaboration is really important for students, and so we want to make sure we're leveraging it during this time as well. That's going to help our online students make sure that they continue to be connected with one another and building a community. But it could be offline as well. And during that time, the teacher will keep the Zoom session open so that students can drop in for extra help or ask questions. A teacher might also meet with small groups of students during that time. And then at the end of the class time, the students would come back together to wrap up that class, just like you'd wrap up an in-person class, to solidify the learning for the day, maybe reiterate the message of what they need to work on going into the next class, or just to set the expectations for the rest of the week. In terms of integrated arts, because we don't have quite the same flexibility and redundancy in our integrated arts teachers, I only have one family and consumer science teacher, one innovation and design teacher. Our online learners will participate in asynchronous integrated arts courses. They will follow the same model as the in-person on-campus courses, so that, again, there should be that seamless transition there. But our online learners will have the opportunity to interact with those teachers during an Eagle block. They could schedule time with them, or during some of those directed study portions as well. And then again, just real quick, so Eagle is that time that for interventions, for services, for extra help, we're going to be working with teachers to develop a bank of activities for students to go deeper during this time as well, and really looking to our teachers to help us flesh out some different activities for students here. But again, the question has come up about Eagle, and we really feel as a community of learners, this is a really important part of our school day. If we're really a school based on mastery learning, and we really are supporting our students to achieve mastery and move through it and move beyond it, that we need to support them in what they need. And their needs may vary from day to day, and that's a critical piece of the middle school experience, is being able to support that. And I already spoke to our smart lunch piece, so I'll leave it there.
Great, thank you, Bethany, and thank you to all of our principals. You get the sense hearing from them that they could go on very long and in great detail about all of these plans, because this is what their life has been for the past several months, is getting ready for this work and to reopen our schools this fall. So one thing I want to underscore is that all of our information is available. We've posted everything we have on our website. I literally don't have any more information than the public has at this point. We've posted not only the high level plan that I put together, but the building level plans that the buildings have put together, the Q&As, presentations, all of our task force meetings. And so we really hope that our public and community will continue to give us feedback on all of that. But with that, Mr. Chair, I wrap up my report and turn it back over to you. Thank you so much for the time to present this information.
Great, and thank you for such a thorough presentation. And I'm watching our administration in awe as they are literally citing all of the stuff off without a script. So great job, guys. Thank you. We are now going to open up the floor to fellow board members to offer their comments. And remember, tonight's session is about our district-wide framework, not necessarily at the individual building level. So we're going to try to frame our conversation in terms of an overview for the entire district. And we're going to focus in a little bit more on the building level details at our individual board meetings coming up next week. So with that said, I'm going to offer to fellow board members, if you can use the raise your hand feature. I will call in the order as received, and for those in the room here, you can just raise your hand and we'll go from there. So if anybody would like to start. Tom Gothier.
There we go. So my first question is for Adam. In terms of unreserved fund balance, Adam, how much of that from the end of last year is going to be able to be carried over to be used on things for this year? I know the money technically has to be spent or allocated by June 30th, but clearly we knew a lot of this is going to be coming. So is there some carryover that's going to be allowed there to reduce some of the initial expenses that we see on the sheet that you presented?
Only with the special school district meeting. So the funds from June 30th were not appropriated. We didn't have a contract in place for anything by June 30th, so we can't encumber those funds any longer. However, with a special district meeting, we can ask the voters to reappropriate those funds before it goes to offset the taxes this fall.
So they have not been used, and we held those in reserve, even though they were approved to be used. For example, Amherst approved, I think it was 400,000 to be able to be used. Those were held back, knowing that we might have expenses down the road. Okay.
Correct. And I want to be clear, I don't want anyone to think that that it won't have a tax impact if we use those funds. If we don't use those funds in a special meeting, our taxes would be lower in the fall. So it still has a tax impact. It's almost as if you're raising new money in a way, but it's helpful to point out that the funds from last year can be used in this purpose in this way.
Stephanie Grunt.
All right. Question about January. So looking at the schedule and the first, when we come back January, I think it's 4th, and there's a 4-week period. Is there any opportunity to maybe make that remote? Because if we have a lot of families potentially traveling over the holiday, is there a thought that not having testing right away, that we just keep that one remote?
Yeah, that's a great idea and a great concept, and I think that's absolutely a possibility. The other thing that frankly is in my mind is going from Thanksgiving through the Christmas holiday, depending on case counts. When the flu season is ramping up, it very well may be that we can't distinguish flu from COVID, and we decide that from Thanksgiving onward we go, or even further back. I just don't know. That's why these 4-week segments are set up that way, because it's completely unpredictable, but it's absolutely something I think is likely that there will be a segment or two or more that are remote only.
Can I keep going? Yeah. So then another question regarding just our kitchen staff. So we're going to have a lot of maybe remote, maybe in person. We don't know the counts. It can change every 4 weeks. How are we staffing the kitchens? How are we helping them predict what food to order, for meals to prepare? Is there some process?
Yeah, another great question. Our school nutrition services staff have their work cut out for them, and they deserve a shout out for the work they've continued to do in delivering meals to people in need around our communities. So thankful for that. It's not happening all over the state, but it's happening here. The short answer is they've got to still find a way to predict it accurately. It's possible that if our counts are way out of whack, and I'd rely on Michelle for this and for John Lash, that we might ask parents to notify us a day ahead of time or even a couple days ahead of time what their general plans are for lunch, so we can get a sense of it. But in general, that's what they do, is they use all the information they have to make a prediction every day about how much food to make. So they'll continue to do that.
Okay.
Thank you, Stephanie. Amy Facey.
Thank you. So my question is around the Teacher Leader Effectiveness Program, and I'm not sure if maybe Christine should answer that, but I just want to know what adjustments we're making for remote teachers and how are administrators able to utilize their time or have time to provide support while ensuring the highest level of student engagement.
Yeah, and I'll turn it over to Christine in a second, but the key word there, Amy, is support. You just used that word. That's what our Teacher Leader Effectiveness and Evaluation Plan has to be focused on this year, is providing that level of support to our teachers. I'm going to be very transparent about this. Teacher evaluation is lower on the priority list than it usually is, given what we're facing, but it's not absent from that priority list. And we had a conversation amongst our administrators about how is this going to look. And really, the way our model is designed is to be a coaching model and to provide that support and guidance just in time for our teachers to improve their instructional practice. Accountability is important, but it's not the primary focus of any of that. So we are thinking through, how do we observe teachers that are remote? How do we still interact, coach them, support them, all of that. So Christine, anything I'm missing or anything you'd like to add, go ahead.
Yeah, that was a perfect answer. So, good.
All right then.
Great. Ellen.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I have two questions. One pertains to the Clark-Wilkins start time change. Could we have a little more of a definitive answer to why? So it was quickly discussed as there would be team meetings during that time. Alternatively, I think so that teachers can stay with their pods all day. And in relation to that change, is there going to be something put in place for parents who maybe just found out about that and now have to scramble because they have to be either online or in-person work at 8 o'clock? So somebody asked in the chat if new morning was going to be a part of the school protocol this year. Will they be helping with that potentially? And then my second question is Clark Wilkins again, in terms of the outdoor time outside the classroom, not just recess, the utilization of the outdoor classroom, what else? Again, it's been discussed, but not in detail. Is it up to the teacher to kind of create their own learning environment outside? If there's a teacher who would like to be outside for most of the day, is that an option? And what I've had a lot of community members ask me, what can be done through the community? Could businesses help support the schools by sponsoring a tent? Maybe the PTA could do something like that. Certainly that little classroom we're building at Clark will help Clark, but I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, we're still waiting on the Ellen Grusian yurt that's going to be donated, but
Oh no, I said get one, not that I would donate it.
I misremembered. Sorry about that. So a couple of things. First, I'll have Anna talk more about the decision about a later start time for elementary. But for me, it really was, I think the thought of little kids wearing masks for an extended period of time doesn't feel manageable to me. And I'll share that. And Anna and her staff came up with a unique way of dealing with that. We understand how that impacts parents and want to work on that mitigation. We're working through things with new mornings, and I can't give a definitive answer on that quite yet, but we will have one shortly. Anna.
So Ellen, a couple of things. So we have lessened the time for specials. I think in the chat you had asked about lost instructional time. So we already are only having a 15-minute special, and then there's opportunity for an additional 30-minute asynchronous opportunity at home. And then because we're in pod, the no movement, the loss of instructional time, we feel is a wash. And for our teachers to be able to have common planning time every single day, to be able to plan with the remote teachers, which we really heard it was very important for our staff to be able to have that common experience, whether you're in school or remote. So those were our two big pieces that we were able to provide with the 8:15 start time. And Adam, I would just love to jump in on the next one too with Ellen, with the outdoor opportunity.
Thank you.
Yep, so part of our resource guide, we've asked for an outdoor tent. We have also asked the PTA for an outdoor tent for Wilkins. We do have a beautiful large field space that we're able to take that on. We have an amazing amount of picnic tables and great spaces outside. So Ellen, definitely having those conversations with teachers that would like to be outside as much as possible. So all that comes down to logistics. Certainly if somebody else wanted to sponsor another tent, we definitely have the grounds for it. We were projecting one for 1 and 2 and one for 3 and 4, and you know the design build on Wednesday for the outdoor classroom at Clark also. So we just feel very fortunate for those opportunities.
Thank you, Anna.
Yep.
Thank you, Anna. David Chen, go ahead.
Can you hear me, Steve? Can you hear me? Okay. I noticed one of the questions was about best practices in online learning, online instruction, actually. And, you know, there was an opportunity last year that we kind of missed on an award that could be given for use of technology at Sauhegan, but we could do this for across the whole SAU. So I just wanted to throw this ball at Adam and see if he's interested in picking it up or figuring out a way that we can execute some sort of an award for, best practices or most creative idea. I saw a presentation on recess that was done at another school that I'm aware of, and they did some very creative things about recess online. So I just make that as an idea for you, Adam.
I appreciate that. If we have the time and capacity, I'm all for it.
All right, up to you.
Thank you, David. George Torres.
Thanks. Is there anything that we are aware of, at least on the legislative front, to assist not only our school district, but districts across the state with some of these significant capital expenditures that we're looking at related specifically to COVID?
Yeah, I don't know of anything at the state level that's in process. Of course, the news has rumors of federal legislation that hasn't gone anywhere in the last couple of weeks. I get the sense we're on our own, but would be thrilled if we were not.
Thank you.
Great question, George. And I do actually have a quick question, Adam, for you from a district standpoint. Why start school I think it was the 3rd instead of actually after Labor Day? So that Wednesday, I know there was some discussion around that. Most of our neighboring districts and communities have pushed it back beyond that date. Our district mandate now to quarantine for 14 days for people traveling out of state, like Stephanie had said, after January and December breaks, it might not necessarily be a bad idea for folks that do have plans to go to upstate New York or anything outside of the New England safe zone. Would now need to be canceled, and it's probably too late in order to do that. And so we'll be forcing those kids to actually do remote sessions for the first 1 or if not 2 segments.
Yeah, I'm cognizant of that, but I'm also worried about instructional time being lost if we have to go remote when flu season comes. Frankly, if I had my druthers and it was a perfect world, we would have started already with air-conditioned schools with good air quality and take advantage of the time when virus counts are so low in the atmosphere. But so frankly, I'm just trying to get as many days as possible in during decent weather. But certainly understand how that's not going to be a perfect solution for every family.
Great, thank you. Stephanie.
Okay, so I know this is kind of Sohegan specific, but it's still part of the plan. So I need to ask the question. It's in regards to the staggered start time and the 9th graders coming in an hour and 20 minutes later and not having a class. I mean, that's over 200 hours of instruction time they're not going to get during the year. Considering we pulled economics out of social studies, and I just feel like we're losing the opportunity to give them some instruction time. And that bothers me. It really bothers me to see that the 10th graders also may be losing the end of the day. I think we need to revisit that. And the reason I'm hesitant on this is a lot of the upper level classes, if we only have single teachers that are teaching those classes, and they're going to be remote anyway, you may only have 11th and 12th graders doing a lot of remote learning, so you've already reduced the number of students at the school. So is there a way we can bring those 9th and 10th graders in and actually teach them?
So Mike, I'll turn to you. I would hope that you, and I know you will, spend a lot more detail on this tomorrow night and again next Tuesday, and if you can get Ms. Grund on board in 30 seconds or less, I'll be really
Good luck.
Yeah, Stephanie, it wasn't easy to get down to this decision, and I will tell you this: we had to change the master schedule, so there is no going back. The master schedule has been done twice, but within the master schedule, we can go ahead and look at how maximizing the time. We were really concerned with the transition of 9th graders coming in, and that is one of the reasons we decided to have them take one less class. I am personally really concerned with 14-year-old students transitioning to high school and navigating 6 or 7 or 8 different teachers throughout the school year on a Google learning management system, as classroom. I think we will be looking to maximize the instruction. We feel like because they're coming in as 9th graders, we still have 3 years to work with them and get them all caught up to where they need to be. And still those students that are really motivated learners and their families are really motivated learners, within the schedule, we can have individual conversations about this. But between the transition, keeping people safe, keeping people in the building, and manageable piece, working on the transition, that's why the decision was made. But I can talk way more detail about it tomorrow and with you at the next school board meeting.
Thank you. Ellen.
Yeah, I want to get more clarification around kindergarten and actually both the Mount Vernon and Amherst districts and remote learning. There's been a couple of different renditions of, yes, they'll get remote learning, but there's no, they're always left off the remote learning list. And then there was a question in the chat, well, if a child is out because of COVID for 14 days, will they get remote learning as a kindergartner? So I'm not clear on who the remote teacher will be unless an entire pod was out. Can somebody clarify that?
Yeah, I'll start. I am not excited about the prospect of students getting kindergarten through remote learning. Some of these students have never been to school at all. None of them have been to school with us, except the very few that were in our preschool. And I'm very concerned with how effective that will be through remote learning, and hoping that we have many more of our kindergarten students in place. I also want to say, and this is more of a broad statement, and this is opening up a little bit of this is going to be a little unique what I'm saying, but I think we need to stop thinking about our students as grade levels and being constrained by a grade level as often as we have in the past. We think of a 5- and 6-year-old being kindergarten, 6-year-old being first grader. We think when you hit 14, it's time for high school. And we've had one disrupted school year. We're about to have another in some way. And I think we need to start thinking about maybe some of our students will need more time before they're ready to move on to middle school or to high school or to graduate and leave us. And I'd love for that to be okay somehow. I know that it blows a lot of people's minds, because that means, well, what do you mean? Does that mean a student's being retained or they failed a year? It's not like when all of us went to school, where if you stayed back, there was something wrong with you. What it means is that I think we need to think about school as when students have mastered the material we put in front of them, they're ready to move on. And some of our students, I think, are going to need more time. And they might need more time in kindergarten. They might need more time in 4th grade one year. They might need more time in middle school. And I think that's got to be okay. So that's a whole nother topic that we've not included in our plan yet, because it's going to come. At the end of this next school year, there's going to be some parents who are going to say to us, I'm not sure my kid's ready for whatever the next step is. And I think we have to be prepared for that.
Adam, I think that's a conversation that people have been having in this district for years. So it's good to have a positive opinion from an administrator that that's an open door, because I think parents have struggled to have their children retained, and be told that's not going to happen. The risks or the issues are just not great enough. But it doesn't answer my question. So
I was about to turn it over back to Anna to answer your question.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So Anna, if you would talk more about the kindergarten remote plan. First on mute.
Yeah. So I think the question, Ellen, is on the survey that Adam is going to send out, though he has shared that it isn't something that we're encouraging kindergarten remote, but Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, that is going to be an option on the survey. So until we get the statistics on what the numbers are, we didn't change at the bottom of our plan with the remote kindergarten, but obviously seeing what the numbers are for remote, we may have to change the remote teachers. Right now, we only have 1 per grade level, but if our numbers per grade level go over 25, we need to look at options for that also. So I think we're prepared, but we're just waiting for the numbers to know the shift and the pivot for what we need to do to flex with every single segment.
So Anna, just to clarify, if parents
Yes.
are saying they are not comfortable sending their kindergartner in because of COVID-19 and the protocols in place, that there will be a remote option for those kindergartners.
That is correct. And I think it's on Adam's survey that, you know, whether it's first grade or kindergarten, if you do not want that in person, that is an option.
Okay. And then Kim, I know I just kind of had the same question for you. Will kindergarten have a remote option at Mount Vernon, and I wasn't clear as who was going to be teaching the remote options in Mount Vernon, because it sounds like your teachers have chosen to be in person.
Yep. So we're really lucky. Our two interventionists, you know what, I can't hear myself, sorry. So our two interventionists have elected to teach remotely, and those interventionists have experience with all of different grade levels, including K. So they will be teaching humanities, ELA, and also be teaching math. And then we have a third teacher who will be teaching science, and she'll also be tackling some 5th and 6th grade content as well.
So those 2 or 3 people will be teaching the entire remote program at the Mount Vernon Village School, K through 6?
So our 2 interventionists will be tackling K through 4, and okay. It was their preference to do that. And then our third teacher will be taking on grades 5 and 6 only, and then some science as well.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Pim.
Thanks, Steve. So my question is regarding health screening. So right now, it looks like we're going to be just doing a health questionnaire on the way into school. And what I'm worried about is even with staggered starts, you could still create a logjam of students trying to, and faculty for that matter, trying to get into the building. Would it be possible perhaps to do an online health questionnaire and then have nurses present at the entrance just to observe and maybe ask just a quick question or something if it's even needed. And then secondly, also with regards to this questionnaires or any kind of information, be it temperature taking or anything, is there a reason or to record any of that information for trend, to look at trends, for instance? Is that something that anybody has thought about, or is it even, maybe it's not necessary at this point? I'm just thinking about doctor's offices that do similar type things.
Yeah, I'll turn it over to Deanna to answer that if you're comfortable, Deanna.
Yeah, I think so. So the reason we weren't testing the kids as they were walking in the building and we're asking parents to screen is because it would end up causing a lineup and social distancing would be really difficult. Their school is looking into, there's the new program for our demographics has a part of it where parents can enter that information in and it's stored in there. So yes, we would have access to what's been happening every day. Does that answer your question, Pim?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Laura Taylor.
Can you hear me?
Or your volume is very low.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
A little bit better. Try it.
Okay. Sorry. Come back to me.
Actually, your volume is fine now. Go ahead.
Oh, great. Okay. The health questionnaire, I had some questions about that. If you mark yes on anything, are you not allowed to participate or go to school?
Deanna?
From what I understand, the program that you enter that information in will tell you that if you answer yes to anything, then no, you would need to call your primary care doctor and have a COVID test done. And this is from the state because this is the guidelines from the CDC. If you go to their website and the state, these are the questions they're asking us to ask. So that's where they're all coming from.
Okay, what about the bus? Any public transportation in another state? So students can't go to school or participate in sports?
I'm sorry, what's the question, Laura, about the travel?
One of there's a travel question on the questionnaire that in the last 2 weeks, have you traveled on public transportation?
Outside of New England?
Outside of New Hampshire, New Hampshire, Vermont, or Maine?
Right, then yes, that's per the state. I put in the chat room the link to the state travel guidance, and that's from that.
Okay. I have other questions, but not
Sure,
helpful.
Laura, I don't see anyone else with their hand raised. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm really concerned about the schedule and what classes are eliminated and are all dual enrollment AP online. We have no other options. I'm concerned about the limited choice by students in the 10th and 11th grade. And I don't know if it's avoidable or if we're going to go with fewer periods next year.
Yeah, Laura, that's a great question. That might be something that may be better framed for your Sohegan board meeting next week, when you guys can dive a little bit deep into the details. Did you have any other questions regarding the district-wide plan?
The assessment for students being NEWA, I don't think that's the best judge of assessing a student. I know especially students that are on the high end of NEWA, it only goes to 99 percentile if you reach a certain level. You know, if my child's in 8th grade and they register and test on a college level, how is their growth measured by NEWA? So I'm a little concerned about using that as the assessment tool for high school. And okay, that's enough for now.
Awesome. Adam, did you want to take that question, or Christine, or for NEWA on a district-wide level, using that for a benchmark for the evaluation process?
Yeah, I'll turn to Christine, but none of our assessments are ever done in a vacuum. We always use all sorts of data to triangulate about individual students and make sure we're getting an accurate measure of them. But Christine, anything to add to that?
And hopefully are my speakers a little, or my microphone a little better now? I switched to my computer mic. So we do use NWEA in 9th grade as well as the beginning of 10th grade. So it'll be really important this year in 10th grade to take a look at how our students are performing. And if they're hitting the ceiling for NWEA, it doesn't make sense for us to give that administration again in the winter or the spring. But we always want to use multiple data points. So we're looking at working with each of our departments to really measure our growth throughout the school year, looking at curriculum-based assessments that we use, different performance assessments. So certainly multiple measures, NWEA would just be one of them, and we would look deeply to see if it made sense for us to add 10th grade, because some 10th grade students do hit the ceiling of NWEA. It can be administered through 11th grade, but most of the time it's not as beneficial with our students to continue to administer that far past that fall of 10th grade. So we'll have to look at that.
Great, thank you, Christine. Seeing no additional hands at this point, what I would like to do is I'd like to actually open up the conversation for the public to contribute their comments. So if you would like to make a public comment during our public comment period, raise your hand through the raise my hand feature, and you'll be allotted a total of 3 minutes for your public comment. Please keep in mind that there'll be no questions answered during the public comment period. Please leverage the question and answer period or feature with inside Zoom to ask your questions, and we'll get you an answer to those as quick as we possibly can. So at this point, calling on the public, I see Braylene Wilson, who has her hand raised. Braylene, the floor is yours for a total of 3 minutes. Braylene Wilson, you are on mute.
The hand was up by accident. I didn't have a question.
Okay, thank you. Daniel Sullivan, your hand is raised. You now have the floor for a total of 3 minutes. Daniel Sullivan, did you have a public comment? Hearing none. Larry Ballard, you have the floor for a total of 3 minutes.
Thank you, Steve. Two things I wanted to make. One, it is slightly disappointing that so much work was put in all summer by teachers and parents through the employee subcommittee, which you were a part of. As you know, that committee made a number of recommendations, which were put to the Trello board, that we haven't quite seen yet. A lot of those recommendations have to do with safety. So teachers and paras have been asking very specific questions about safety and cleaning protocols, procedures, logistics for several weeks. And the response has typically been that those items are being investigated and worked on. So now we reach the first decision point, but draft 3.0 is presented tonight, and the individual building plans still don't answer a lot of those logistical questions about safety concerns, things like how will distancing procedures take place, not just that we have them, but what will that look like, actual cleaning procedures and frequency, how mask exemptions will be handled, and the logistics of lunch, which would require mask removal for all students. So during public comment time, I would just say from a teacher perspective, it's challenging to make an informed decision about in-person versus remote by August 15th without all this safety information that we've tried to get for the past several weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Harold Ransett, you have the floor for a total of 3 minutes. Harold, did you have a public comment? Hearing none. Daniel Sullivan, you have the floor for a total of 3 minutes.
Okay. Hi there. One of the questions that I have is primarily, why has the option of holding the essentially first two months of school mostly out of doors has not been explored? There's lots of room on the playing fields in Sauhegan, and you could put up large tents and at least move half the students out there. It seems that if you chose an option like this, that would get you through most of September and October. And by that point, you really would have a better idea whether or not the school system was going to work. You'd get a big feel for what's happening in the rest of the country, and you would have reduced the need for increased ventilation within the buildings, because that is one of your main issues right now as to how to maintain a good environment within the buildings. These buildings were never meant to have an increased set of ventilation, and I see that you're trying to look at that using in your plan, including the comments on UV radiation, which I put something in the comments, by the way. I don't believe of the veracity of that method right now based upon our HVAC system. So I was especially thinking that the younger grades, kindergarten, first, second, and third grade, most of that should be held outside as much as possible. I know there is learning happening in the first, second, and third grades, but the main issue of things that you want is the socialization aspect and learning the ABCs and story time and those aspects of education, and most of that can be done outside. You know, you can take the Waldorf schools or the Montessori schools as your example. I have 4 children going in the Sauhegan right now. And again, a lot of the work that they're doing could be done in smaller groups outside. And the other thing that I was thinking about, and I'm wondering why it hasn't been done, is in the event that we need to go to all online at some point in the future, that there should be groups of students. I mean, my sons have groups of kids who they like to hang out with, and they could form essentially pods, the whole idea of pod learning that some of the what's going on in the cities where people are hiring actual teachers. But again, my kids really do not want to be all alone while they're studying, and they could be studying with their friends. I think I'm out of time.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to make a public comment?
Stephen?
I see Harold Rancet one more time. Bear with me just a moment. Let's see if we can get Harold to speak. Harold, you have the floor for a total of 30 seconds. I'm sorry, 3 minutes. Harold, we still cannot hear you. I got your message saying that you fixed your mic. If you'd like, let's go to our school board member and we can come back to you one more time. Elizabeth.
No, I just wanted to make sure you saw his message.
Yes.
About his mic being fixed.
Harold? We cannot hear you, Harold. I apologize. Let's move on to Kate Costello. You have the floor for a total of 3 minutes. Kate Costello, go ahead.
Sorry about that. Thank you for everything you're doing. I was curious why the start times are being changed this year.
Great. Did you have a public comment? We're going to frame all questions in the question and answer feature so we can actually capture them and then put them online later.
Sure. I was just thinking that it would be difficult for many working parents to adjust their working day for the start time of 9:15, I believe it is. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Any more public comments? Great. Seeing none, let's move back to the board, and we will entertain a motion to accept the SAU reopening plan as presented by our superintendent and our team of administrators. I can entertain that motion from any member now. Pim, I see a motion. Pim, would you like to make the motion?
Yes, I'd like to make the motion as presented by Adam.
Great. Do I see a second in the room here to
I'll
make it
second
easier?
that.
All right, Scott St. Dennis chimed in. Thank you. Let's open it up for discussion. Is there any discussion? Great, we're on 2 pages here, so bear with me, guys, as I verify.
Steve, can I jump in real quick?
Yep, I see Laura Taylor here first. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go
and
ahead,
if you
Laura.
can pause just one moment. Laura, go ahead.
Yep.
Can you verify what's being presented, and should we be doing weighted voting?
And Laura, what would you like to have clarified in terms of what's being presented? I thought that was pretty clear why we're here tonight.
Adam had 4 things listed. I'm just trying to dissect which one we're talking about.
Okay. We are discussing the reopening plan as presented by the superintendent of schools. That was the plan document that was presented to all board members prior to this evening in the PDF. The school reopening plan includes the segmentation of our calendar year, the status of our school buildings in terms of being open or closed, the potential administration of policies that are going to restrict access to our building or request students not attend, the remote option for parents that do not feel comfortable sending their kids to school, the remote option for faculty members to opt in or opt out and present a more well-rounded approach that way. Or what other clarification did you need?
I wanted to know if weighted voting was an option.
Mr. Superintendent, would you like to comment on that?
Certainly can. Weighted voting is always an option for a board vote when a majority of those members present vote in favor of having a weighted vote.
Great. Laura, so there's a motion currently on the floor. Did you want to request a weighted vote? We can open that piece up for discussion.
Sure, I'll request a weighted vote.
Great, I hear a request for a weighted vote. Let's open up the floor for comments regarding a weighted vote. Ellen, I know your hand's up for that. Stephanie, your hand's up. Did you want to address the weighted vote option? Great.
You could clarify what a weighted vote is for me, though. I'll put my hand up for that.
Mr. Superintendent, it's been years since a weighted vote has been requested at the SAU level, probably since the early 2000s. Normally our district gets along quite well with voting members, so we have a request to actually proceed with a weighted vote request. Go ahead, sir.
Sure. RSA 194-C:8, weighted voting. In all votes regarding school administrative unit affairs, including the organization of such units, school board, and selection of officers, each district shall be entitled to one vote for each 16 pupils residing in that district and enrolled in the school under the administrative unit. A balance of 8 or more students shall entitle that district to an additional vote. A balance of fewer than 8 students shall have no effect on a district's vote. Enrollments shall be based on the average daily membership and residence of each district for the school year which ended the preceding June. Weighted votes shall only be used upon the demand of a majority of the members of any board present and voting in the school administrative unit. The school board members present at a school administrative unit school board meeting shall be entitled to cast the entire number of votes assigned to their school districts, provided that each representative present shall be entitled to a proportionate share of the total to be cast, as provided in RSA 194-C:7.
Great, thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Ms. Laura Taylor, may I ask for the purpose or reason for your request?
Due to the fact that you're trying to vote on a SAU 39 platform for something that affects individual boards which have been elected to represent their individual schools.
Thank you. Elizabeth Kuzma.
I just want to verify, by present, do you mean physically present in the building, or do you mean present in the meeting?
Present in the meeting.
Okay. I also want to add in, just because information on weighted voting came up recently, all of AMS's 7th and 8th graders that are Mount Vernon residents actually count for Mount Vernon votes. Per the New Hampshire School Board Association attorney.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Ellen?
I had no questions about weighted voting, but I wanted to go back to the discussion component.
Great. We're just going to take care of the weighted voting component first, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Yeah.
Great. Are there any other comments regarding weighted voting?
What the, hey, I missed the weighted voting. What is that?
I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
I didn't mean to. I had to move. Sorry.
Okay. So let's go ahead and actually we're going to do a roll call vote for the request of one of our board members to go to a weighted vote regarding the adoption of our SAU 39 reopening plan. We're going to start off actually in the town of Amherst. Beth Kuzma, how do you vote? Yes or no?
No, I don't want weighted voting.
Mr. Gothier,
I vote no as well.
Ms. Beam,
Wait, had to unmute. No.
Ms. Grungeon,
No.
Mr. Conklin,
Conklin, no.
Mr. Gronstra,
No.
Mrs. Facey,
No.
Mr. Chen, Mr.
No.
Chen, Mr. Coughlin,
No.
Ms. Taylor, Ms. Taylor,
I'll vote yes since I brought it forward.
Mr. Torres,
No.
Ms. Grunt,
No.
Ms. Lawrence,
No.
Mr. Eckhoff,
No.
Ms. Hinckley, I'm assuming you're still not present? Mr. St. Dennis,
No.
Mr. O'Keefe votes no as well, 1 in favor and 15 opposed. That does not successfully pass. Let's regain or return to the conversation regarding the motion to accept SAU 39's reopening plan, and we'll move to Ellen.
Thanks, Steve. The only suggestion I wanted to make is for the Clark Wilkins team to reconsider the start time and potentially making the day shorter instead of coming later. So in my feedback with working parents, the late start is always a little challenging once a month for them. So I have to think a 9:30 start every day for them is going to make potentially school attendance for their children out of the hands or out of their hands. So I'd suggest we also look at potentially dismissing the children earlier. I don't know how that would work with buses, but I'd like to see at least a plan come forth just for that component. Doesn't mean I would not vote yes to the SAU plan, but I think that needs a little more attention. Thanks, Steve.
Great, Ellen, thank you. Stephanie Grun.
So it's similar to what Ellen's saying for the younger grades. I'm going to ask about the Sohegan 9th and 10th grade schedules again. I'd really like to see the academic time added in. You know, I'm not going to hold up this plan, but I really would like that revisited. The other question I have is, if we are voting for this plan, does that include these temporary policy changes and the duration? No. Okay, because I had some questions on that. And I want to make sure I'm not approving that because it's in this document. That's why.
Yeah, we're discussing the policy changes actually after the vote to adopt the district-wide plan. The district-wide plan does not succeed. There's very little reason to adopt the policies at this meeting because we'll have to go back and revisit what the next plan would actually be like. Perfect. Thank you. Great question. Any other comments from board members with regards to the motion from Pim? Seeing none, let's do a roll call vote in the same order. Let's pull up my handy dandy cheat sheet here. We're going to start off with the Amherst board with Ms. Kuzma.
Kuzma, yes.
Mr. Gothier.
Gothier, yes.
Ms. Beam.
Beam, yes.
Ms. Grungeon.
Grugin, yes.
Conklin.
Conklin, yes.
Mr. Gronstra.
Gronstra, yes.
Ms. Facey.
Facey, yes.
Mr. Chen.
Yes.
Mr. Coughlin.
Yes.
Ms. Taylor.
Vote no. I'm nervous about the scheduling of the high school.
Mr. Torres.
Torres, yes.
Ms. Grund.
Yes.
Ms. Lawrence.
Yes.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Yes.
Mr. St. Dennis.
St. Dennis, yes.
O'Keefe, yes. That motion passes 15 yes, 1 no, and 1 not in attendance. So thank you everyone for the time, and I want to thank the administrators for their effort tonight in their presentation. I thought it was absolutely stellar. It's clear that you guys have done a lot of great work over the past couple of weeks, and our community, and I can speak on behalf of my board members. We appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Superintendent, let's move to the order of your requests for policies. And I would like to actually start, if it's okay with you, Ms. Kuzma, as the chairperson of our policy committee. In which order would you like to address those? Do we want to start off with our mask policy first?
Yeah, well, everything is that we actually put everything into one policy, which is why I paused.
Okay.
We put everything into one policy that is directly needed to deal with opening. So everything that Adam read earlier is actually all into the mask policy, including the amendments to visitors in the building and restricting the use of the facilities and things like that.
So, then if it's okay with you, then let's take a step back and
Yep.
let's first grant our superintendent reauthorization of our motion that we passed back in March. That's probably the easier conversation. And we can have that dialogue, and then we can move on to the one policy that we would like to adopt for this evening at the request of the policy committee. So I will entertain a motion specifically for Mr. Coughlin, because he's got it right in front of him, with regards to the motion to extend our superintendent's authority for the COVID situation.
So I move to authorize the superintendent to take any action he deems reasonably necessary to address the threat posed by the COVID-19 virus to our students, staff, and community, including but not limited to modifying the SAU's calendar and/or the manner of delivery of educational services, and consistent with all applicable statutes, rules, and regulations. And parenthetical note, that was the exact motion we made back in March when this all started.
Thank you, Mr. Coughlin.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Spacey seconds.
Open it up for discussion.
See, Terry, Ms. Bing, did you have something, Terry? No, okay, great. So hearing no discussion, I will entertain a roll call vote. Oh, I'm sorry, Stephanie, go ahead.
So now that we have school board meetings scheduled and going forward, I know there's a lot of changes and there's going to be a lot of decisions going on with status changes and stuff like that. Is that what this is going to cover? So he doesn't need to come to the school board every time he wants to make a status change? Or what else is he looking to change that he can't discuss at a school board meeting that we're going to be holding regularly now?
Great question. So the context in which our motion passed back in March was to authorize him to move to remote learning in the speed in which we did prior to really any other local district and before the state had mandated such change. And granting our superintendent that level of authority allows us to be flexible in a time of COVID. And adopting the plan that we had today to move between the different tiers of status for our district without him having to seek authority or permission from us, to engage faculty members and staff members to talk about whether or not they are going to remote in or do in person. So empowering him to make any other significant changes that would normally require board level approval, change to the calendar, change to vacation times. Of course, I'm assuming Mr. Seal, I can speak for you, he would seek guidance from us before doing anything drastic, but it's in order to afford him that level of permission and authority from us. Mr. Seal, did you want to make a comment?
No, Mr. Chair, I don't. I think you got it right.
Great, thank you. Mr. Chen.
So a lot of decisions have been made, but what I view as one of the most critical decisions is when we transition from red to yellow or yellow to green or whatever. Those decisions are immensely critical. Critical to the health of the whole town, critical to the health of all the students that we have, critical to transmission rates. And, you know, we did have a question in the list that we submitted that talked about what the criteria were going to be. You know, I've been given a list of data. There was a list of criteria that Anna presented on one slide, but those criteria can all be read in multiple different ways. And I'm concerned that without some guidelines and what we want to, how we want to do that, and not that I distrust Adam, that's not the case. It's that these things are being misread by people across this country, all over the place. There is no consistency in how these measures are taken into account, and whether you open up businesses or close up businesses or whatever it is, you know, there's just countless numbers of things. I'd just like to see a little bit more clarity on the criteria that is going to be used. I would not approve something that just basically leaves it up to anybody's judgment, much less Adam's. You know, I wouldn't want to have that judgment made for myself, taken on by myself. I certainly would be concerned about any one individual in our school system or anywhere across the state or anywhere across the country that makes that universal decision all by themselves. This is an incredibly critical decision that's made, and I'm fearful of the consequences of this. Is not just Adam. You know, next year we might have another superintendent, and we empower that individual with the same kind of trust, and you know it goes to something else. It's just something that I'm very concerned about, and honestly, I don't have a dog in this fight. I don't have kids in the school system, but I'm concerned about the students all across our two towns. Something I'm very concerned about, and I just wish that you people would give some thought to how they would like to see that done.
Great, thank you, David. And a little out of the ordinary, Mr. Steele, would you mind just commenting quickly about the criteria that you're going to potentially leverage and how you would use this authority?
Indeed. So communication is a big part of it. And so as a board, board always has the authority to overrule the superintendent or remove the superintendent's authority in very limited circumstances. And I don't have a big ego about these sort of things. I want to get it right and appreciate board feedback, but I do feel strongly that you folks need to have someone at the superintendent's chair that you do trust to make this type of decision. Because it's critical that you have that kind of confidence in your superintendent. I am happy to continue to be as transparent as possible. This is not like a snow day. I don't want to make that comparison, but the machinations that go into it are similar in that there is a pool of data. Everyone in the area interprets it differently, and I've got to make a decision based on that pool of information. I do plan on leveraging as much into a dashboard of data that I possibly can, but this is very much an administrative judgment about what the right thing to do is. It just can't be broken down into a system with great clarity. I feel strongly that you folks as a board need to be involved and to let me know if you think I'm getting it wrong. I trust that you will. And if I'm getting it right, you also need to let me know that so I can know that I'm continuing down the right path. I don't take it lightly that the board is trusting me to make some of these decisions or that you trusted me to make them this past spring. I'd hope I would have heard by now had I gotten it wrong this past spring. But in lieu of that, I think this is the right way to go.
Great, thank you, Mr. Steele. And Mr. Chen, just a quick comment from my perspective. The state has very little in terms of this type of process. And as I said in my opening remarks, there is no roadmap for this. And so when we were forced to develop a plan or a strategy, I wouldn't say we were on an island, but we were kind of up to ourselves to generate what we felt from our community standpoint, what would be the best strategy. And that's what the task force had done really over the last 3 months with Mr. Manning's team and the medical team. And this is the guidance and advice that they actually provided. I could not agree more with you that we need to have clear and concise directives in terms of when decisions are actually going to be made terms of what tier that we're going to go through from a school open, school closed, or a part-time status. But we do have to empower our administrators to make those decisions for us when the state fails to do so. Because I would trust that our superintendent, if he saw different things going on with inside our buildings, he would make the decision to actually close them and close them quite quickly for the safety and health of our students, our faculty, our staff, and our community. But that's just my quick comment. Ms. Taylor, your hand is raised. Go ahead.
I wanted to say that I feel that board members are not advisors nor employees of the district. They're an extension of state law, and out of respect for democracy, we should not be neglecting our roles as board members to oversee the school. And I feel like this particular policy is too broad and it's no longer justified. And even we haven't had board member meetings over the summer. There have been little to no communications to the boards in regards over the summer, and I feel like it's no longer justified. So if there was a policy that was far more specific, but I feel like a broad policy is just handing over our responsibility that we have been given by people that elected us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Mr. Gronstein.
Thanks, Steve. I just wanted to get back to what Dave was talking about and what Adam had kind of added some information on, and that is the whole process by which a determination is made, a decision is made on what status we are in or going into or coming out of. And, you know, so I'm a data guy. I like things that are driven by data and backed up by data versus just being subjective. And I know there's obviously going to be elements of subjectivity that are in this. And I'm looking at the types of data that you have listed in your presentation. And there's certain things in here that you definitely could, you know, that are data driven. You know, we talk about case counts, mortality data, positivity rates, hospitalizations. That's all, those are all numbers, right? Are those numbers exact? Probably not, but there's going to be a margin of error that's going to be, you know, relatively in the ballpark. And, you know, teacher cases, bus driver availability, again, those are all numbers that you can, you know, pin to. Other areas, decrees, federal and state-led decrees, those may or may not be more subjective. But again, survey data is just as it says, is data. So I'm thinking if it's possible to establish bands, and by which, you know, if you're in certain bands of data and trends, for example, you know, I know just case counts by themselves don't mean anything, but if you're looking at trends, you know, in the area, in the towns, in our towns, in the area towns, what does that mean? So if your trends are going up, but we're still in the yellow, maybe we should start thinking about orange, or the opposite, right? If we're in yellow and they're going down, then we can start, even if our case counts are still on the high end of the band, you can see trends and you can start to make the right types of decisions based on that. I'm not saying I have the answers. I'm just saying, you know, maybe let's try, if there's a way to develop something using data that's available, something that you can hang your hat on versus just saying, and I know this, you'd never do this, Adam, but hey, today I feel like it's, you know, it's going to be an orange day, or I feel like it's going to be a green day, you know, whatever, that type of thing. So I just want to kind of throw that out there. It doesn't have to be answered right now, but something to think about as we go and try to figure out best path forward. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Pim. We're going to go to Ellen and then David. Ellen.
Thanks, Stephen. I just wanted to comment off Laura's comment that as a board member throughout the summer, I felt quite included in the conversations, mostly because every Thursday I sat on my computer and was able to view 100 community members, school board members, administrators, teachers, etc., putting together this plan. So it just in support of the people who worked so hard on that all summer long, There were several emails, and I think that Adam and his administration team did a phenomenal job of keeping us in the loop as much as they could as things were evolving. And I would say our chair did that as well. So I just want to step in and you know, just redirect that comment. I think that every ship needs a captain. This is a big ship with a lot of opinion. And I trust that Adam, when making difficult decisions, as he has done in the past, would confer with the appropriate board or the SAU board, especially when it comes to any financial decisions, as we know he will and has to. So I'm in full support of Adam being able to drive the decision-making machine on this. I don't see another way in this complicated climate we're in to have it done.
Thank you, Ellen. David Chen.
Tim, I agree with you 100%. It is a bunch of data. You know, some of the data is going up, some of the data is going down. There are ways of analyzing this and giving us ranges of, you know, what the criteria might be. I'm not saying I know the answer, but I did propose an idea to Adam about, you know, about a dashboard that we could publish and make available to everybody. I'm not saying that that will give us the right answer all the time, but it at least gives us some guidelines on how to proceed with this, with the decisions. The decisions are really critical decisions, you know, and they're people's lives are affected by it. Your family life would be affected by it. You want to, you know, this isn't about Adam. You have to take it out, in my mind, you have to take it out of Adam's hands and say that a different superintendent that we had, or if it was another administrator that was supposed to make this decision in lieu of Adam, you have some ideas that you're basing your judgment on. He just makes a decision to go, you know, green or something like that, or she makes a decision to go green. That's not necessarily a good justification for it. You know, you may not have a good justification for it. So it's not about Adam. When you mention Adam, Ellen, you know, I take offense to that. It's not about Adam. It is about the whole process of making a decision that affects so many people's lives in this town, both of our towns.
But this policy is about Adam, David. This policy is specifically about our superintendent.
No, I disagree with it. This policy is about a generalized policy for whoever is in that position. It's not about Adam. It's not just about Adam.
Thank you.
Irrespective of that, there is the whole notion that it's a generalized approach that we have to take, and we have to look at the different alternatives. You know, generally I trust Adam's decisions. You know, I think he makes good decisions. But in this case, I think we ought to have to think about, you know, making it a little bit more complex, making it a little bit more analytical, and seeing what goes to happen. By the way, Adam, I am still 100% behind the whole notion of building a dashboard that we can look at, and I'll keep on working on that, irrespective of what the decision is, and because I really think that's a necessary, you know, facet of going through this process.
Agreed.
Thank you, David. Terry.
Oh, wait, do I get to take off my mask briefly? Sorry, I'm caught. I have headphones too. All right, that was awkward. Still awkward. Sorry about that. So I think this goes back to when I very first joined the board, it really comes down to we do policy and our administration administers. And when we came up with this and we voted on this in the spring, we were not giving new powers per se. We were saying, continue to act like our superintendent and make decisions because we have hired you to be our superintendent and to administer. It was simply an extra vote of confidence, I believe, for us to say, listen, we know this is a little bit unprecedented. It's a bigger thing than we normally have to deal with. So we want to show our support that we trust you. And if at some point we had no faith, if we had decisions that we weren't agreeing with and that we didn't understand, and we couldn't come to some agreement and decide that those were appropriate, then we could very well vote a no faith vote. but that's a totally separate thing. As of now, there has been nothing to assume that we would have no faith. We're all saying that we agree with the steps that have been taken. Nothing has been done in a vacuum. It's been very open, very, if anything, it's been a deluge of information that you might not have time to go through, right? I've been so grateful for all of the members of the reopening committee, and the fact that it's such a wide swath of people from a lot of different expertise, even beyond what our administration has. And so looking at what they've already done, looking at how open the communication is, and looking at our roles, I believe that all we're simply doing here is saying, we continue to have faith. Thank you for so far living up to that faith. And if that changes, that's a different conversation in my opinion.
Thank you, Terry. Steve Coughlin, then Sarah Lawrence, then Laura Taylor.
Okay, so I was going to say one thing, but I need to say something else first. We've sort of lapsed into the language of talking about this as a policy. It's not a policy. It's a reauthorization of existing authorities we've given the superintendent. So even if this failed, he still has those authorities. We would need to vote to revoke those authorities. But the real thing I want to talk about is sort of along the same lines Pim talked about, which is the decision-making process in the plan that we provided in the packet. Some of the things in this process are very clear and simple. The governor shuts us down, the governor shuts us down. There's no judgment required by the superintendent. If the governor ever said, you must open, you don't have a choice, well, that would be interesting, but again, it's a very clear directive from a higher authority. Some of the things are, however, we don't know enough to make even sort of the broad bands I think Dave is asking for. For example, if we look at resource availability, teacher cases, I would expect that not to be an absolute number, but to be a discussion between the superintendent and the principal in the building about where are we and can we continue in the current operating mode, or do we have to lapse to a more restrictive mode, or are we now available to open up to a less restrictive mode? So that's a daily decision based on daily facts, and there's no way the board, any of these three boards, could negotiate and decide what the right thing to do is. It's really between the superintendent and the principal. Similarly, looking at student attendance rates, that's going to be the same sort of thing. When do we cross a line for a school where there just aren't enough classes with enough students and it's time to collapse to a lower access mode, or is it time, are we now able to move back up to a higher access mode, just based on the number of students we have coming? So while I would love to say, all right, Adam, I'm sorry, I don't want to say names, superintendent, here are the guidelines, and you just have to live in those boundaries. They were a little deadband on either side, but that's not going to be realistic. We don't know enough about operating in this mode to make any kind of limits. We're going to be learning. Maybe by January we'll know enough to make some more restrictive decisions, or to, I don't know how to say this, to better clarify what the decision criteria are. But we don't, I absolutely believe we don't know it now, except for the simple things like the governor says stop, and end of story.
Thank you, Steve. Sarah?
Thank you. I would just like to say that I feel as though there is an established pattern of partnership. We know that our superintendent does not act in a vacuum. We know that he's a collaborator. We know that he looks at not only the state, but national guidelines. What we're talking about here is simply extending something that we voted on as a vote of confidence, back in the spring. I feel as though what we have in place is perfectly adequate. And I'm not exactly sure why we need to belabor the point when what we're talking about is evaluating things on a changing basis, we know that our superintendent can do that. So I guess I would just ask that we consider his strengths and look to that as we're coming to a vote on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor?
Yeah, I just, it's not that I feel that Adam should not be making these decisions of the different color bands of each day. That obviously would be in his hands. It's the broad nature of this particular policy, and I feel if the board is not fulfilling their role as oversight, the only oversight we give a superintendent would be the state and federal laws. I just feel that this policy is too broad and basically handing everything to the superintendent that the school board is by law in charge of.
Thank you, Ms. Stacy.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that this is not a policy, but I'd actually like to call the question.
Question's been called. Let's do a roll call vote.
I'm assuming you started with me. Your microphone cut out, but.
Yeah, no, I just had to quickly hit mute for something. Ms. Kuzma?
Kuzma, sorry, we've been everywhere. We're reaffirming what we gave in March, correct?
That's correct. This is the confirmation
Yes.
and the continuation of our March vote.
Yes, thank you. Kuzma, yes.
Mr. Gothier?
Gothier, yes.
Harry?
Team, yes.
Virgin, yes.
Josh?
Conklin, yes.
Tim?
Cronster, yes.
Amy?
Stacy, yes.
David?
No vote.
Mr. Coughlin?
Yes.
Taylor, no. Thank you.
Mr. Torres?
Torres, yes.
Ms. Grund?
Grund, yes.
Ms. Lawrence?
Lawrence, yes.
Mr. Eckhoff?
Eckhoff, yes.
Mr. St. Dennis?
St. Dennis, yes.
And O'Keefe, yes. So that's 2 noes. Affirmative and 1 absent. Ms. Kuzma, did you want to address the policy presentation for this evening?
Yes. I am going to try sharing my screen. Or not. Wait. All right, can everybody see it? I've never had to share a screen quite like this before, so. Okay. All right, so Adam already read the policy word for word. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually just gonna go through, break it up into chunks and kind of explain the thought process and the reasonings behind each section rather than reading it word for word again. We just, in the beginning, we included just the reasons why this policy has been created, including the governor's actions, the CDC's information, as well as the state laws on what the school district's purpose is, as well as the state law. And then we moved down into the mask coverings and requirements. We felt that, you know, whatever policy we created needed the ability for Adam to be able to move, or needed to be flexible enough for us to be able to move between the orange, yellow, and green and blue statuses without creating policy all over again, because we might hit points where we bounce back and forth for a little while rather than just moving into green and staying green forever. So we needed some flexibility there. There, of course, has to be policy fitting in for people that have a documented medical condition or disability that prevents them from wearing a mask. So that of course needed to be included, as well as some information about the staff who work with our deaf and hard of hearing students who need need to be able to see the staff members' lips and face and things like that. So we just kind of went through. We also felt the need to include information of exactly what a proper mask is. Obviously, lace wouldn't cut it. But if we don't have documentation that says that there's limits on what constitutes an effective mask, you know, we felt the need to include that. And then, of course, what happens if students refuse to abide by this policy is included. With the testing notifications, testing is really slow right now. So is the notification process for the contact tracers. So we felt the need to get the information as soon as possible from families and staff if they've been tested, so that we can make the appropriate decisions at that point. We didn't want to have to wait 14 days to hear from the state that somebody's tested positive. We're asking them and telling them that they need to notify us themselves rather than waiting for the state to do so. And then we already talked about the need to include some other policy changes within here. This is more of a, you know, current situation policy versus mask only policy. So we decided that we could actually fit it all in to one policy. So right now, athletes are required to take school transportation to and from their games. We decided that parents should be allowed to not have that happen a little bit easier than they can right now. And then right now, our policy for school facilities, as well as the visitor access, that needs to be adjusted. It's not a permanent change, so we didn't want to make a permanent change to those policies. It's going to be temporary. Or at least we hope that this doesn't go on forever. And then the duration, we've made it known this is a temporary policy. We can rescind it at any point that we deem necessary. And you know, working with the governor and his current emergency orders and things like that. But also we wanted the ability to not forget that this policy is here and kind of check back every so often to make sure that the information is still valid and that the use of this policy is still valid. So all boards will be reviewing this policy every quarter to make sure that it's still appropriate. It does not need to be revoted on every quarter, but it does need to be at least acknowledged and looked at so that we can say, wait a minute, this isn't actually a valid, we don't need this anymore, type of thing. And well, also the superintendent will have, is required to give us quarterly implementation updates. So how is the implementation going? Are we running into issues? We'll get that information quarterly. We do, as boards, have the ability to set our agenda, especially in the beginning. We might ask Adam to give us more frequent updates on how this policy is being played out. But requiring it monthly as part of a policy means that, you know, 8, 9, 10 months down the line, the rest of the policy is still valid, but we've hit the point that how it's playing out is still a regular thing. We don't necessarily need to hear about it monthly. So we want the ability to move it to quarterly if necessary. But in the beginning, every board chair is allowed to ask for monthly updates if necessary. So, and then down below, we have some legal references that were used in the creation of this policy. And so forth. We have had an attorney review this policy just to make sure that we're not going crazy on this. So it has been reviewed and passed legal muster. So I will continue sharing, but because of that, Stephen, if you want to be in charge of calling on people.
Great. So just a point of order, Beth, is the plan tonight to fast track this particular policy for final approval tonight? Or is it to entertain a motion to move this to the individual boards for the first read tonight and the second read next week for adoption at the individual board meetings?
Just for, it really could go either way, but I think that working this like we do with a regular policy, with moving this forward to next week. But if there's any questions, comments, thoughts on that, they need to be addressed here so we can just approve them next week and this is considered the first read.
Great.
Adam, unless you really want it done today.
No, I think that's exactly the right way to do it, is have it done at the SAU level tonight and then the individual boards approve it next week.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. We're going to go first to Ms. Lawrence, who has her hand raised, and then to Peter Eckhoff.
Thank you. So I did realize, Beth, that when we were looking at this policy and we talked about the provisions for sports and parents being able to transport their students to athletic activities, that we actually have student athletes who drive, and we did not address that. So I do feel that that's something that's going to come up as a parental question, and it's something that we should probably address in this policy.
Good point.
Thanks.
Yeah, Adam, can we make that edit?
Let me research that and perhaps make a change at the Sauhegan board meeting next week, because that would only apply to Sauhegan. We don't have too many 8th graders that drive quite yet.
Fair enough.
I just want to think about the implications of that. We can't have, I'm not comfortable with a student driving other students home from an away game. That's my only concern. I want to think through how we word that.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you, Sarah. Peter?
Thanks, Steve. I'll just tack on to that. Do we have to have, or should we have something in there that requires proof of insurance for the operator of the vehicle for that piece of it? My question on the mask is, should we have any language in there pertaining to what is appropriate, or more better phrased is inappropriate, if some of our older students get creative with their mask coverings? Should there be any language in there that staff has the authority to ask a child to remove his mask and put on one supplied by the school?
Wouldn't that fall under a dress code though?
It would, but I would think it would. This is kind of like clothing at this point, I would think.
Looking at the current wording, so was the superintendent will establish and mask and/or face covering definitions, style guidelines, and efficacy requirements. I think that allows him to still turn around and say, and they still need to meet dress code guidelines. So that situation is covered without needing to make wording changes. In my perspective, Adam, you're the one that's making these decisions. But my perspective is you're allowed to still do that.
I guess my only comment would be that Adam's not going to be in the building every day. So I would think there might be some language there that allows administrative staff that are in the building to make that decision, not just Adam.
There was,
I may be missing something.
Yeah, no, I see what you're going for. I
mean, let's hope it doesn't happen, but if it does, then a student should be asked to remove the mask, given a replacement from the supply, and maybe a note sent to the parent saying, hey, you gotta eliminate that mask from the repertoire. I don't know. It's just like wearing an offensive t-shirt. So
right.
Just a thought, but Adam's not going to be in the building every day looking at everybody's mask, whereas you've got administrative staff that are going to be in the building. So that's my only thought.
There was
number 6, Beth. It says or his designee, with input from the building nurse. So he can designate various people to.
Yes, thank you. I'm like, I know that there's this whole section that we talked about with the nurse, especially being able to decide what's effective and like making that call. So yeah, so it's at that point a staff member could, you know, it opens up that option. You know,
Great.
like for that. Thank you. That was Josh, right?
Thank you, Peter.
No, thank you.
Stephanie.
Okay, two questions. One on the mask policy, number 4, where the district shall endeavor to maintain a supply of masks for students and staff who don't have access. So my concern is if we have a homeless student, or we have a student who can't afford to go out and get masks, what if we run out of supply of masks because they're hard to get? How are we impeding this child's education? Are we going to run into any issues with that? I just want to have that covered. The other piece that I have a question on is the duration. And it's about, or the board determines there is no longer substantial risk that I'm asked, blah, blah, blah. I guess I would like to see that the board is actually the one making that final decision, not just or. So the governor rescinds his policy. I still think it needs to come to us as a board to maybe make the final vote. And I'd like that wording potentially changed.
So it says, or whichever one is longer. So if he changes it, we still have the ability to determine that
I'd like it. Yeah, but the wording, I don't know. The wording says or, and it makes me wonder. I don't know. It's not super clear to me.
I think the reason for that wording, in my perspective, is that because it could actually, the governor could actually supersede our decision. We could say, no, we don't want masks, but the governor could step in and make them mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of gives that, it could go, it depends either way, but it does clear up the who has the final say of whichever one is longer, or, you know, whichever one happens last, the later event. So if we decide that we don't want them anymore, but the governor steps in, he's the later event. But if the governor rescinds his and we say no, we're the later event.
Okay, because when I see the or, I know that says ladder, but I see or. I don't, you know what I mean? It just, I'm gonna have to go with it. But I am concerned about the endeavor to supply. If that makes sense.
I've seen on the list of all the stuff that we're trying to acquire to kind of opening safer. We have a cloth. You know, we've got cloth masks for students on there for when they're needed. You know, for kid.
Yeah. I just want to make sure we always have something for those in need.
Yep.
Because otherwise they can't come into school, and therefore we can't supply them the education potentially. So I just want to make sure. We're very careful with that.
Thank you, Stephanie. Before we move on to Laura, Steve, and then Scott, I just want to quickly comment on that because I know the Mount Vernon principal has already made a significant outreach to the Mount Vernon community for donations. And I think we've already received quite a few handmade ones. So that might be something that we can share tonight, that if those awesome people at home that are really good at arts and craft could potentially make some and drop them off at our buildings or whatever the superintendent would organize. I'm sure would be very, very receptive to receiving those donations to help out kids in need like that. So a little Mount Vernon charm spread district-wide. So thank you, Kim, for that. Laura Taylor, go ahead.
I actually don't have a problem with the policy, except for the duration. And there's a run-on sentence, and I think it changes the meaning. It's the same sentence that Stephanie was talking about, where it talks about the governor, his emergency order, comma, modifies his order to eliminate the face mask. So it's rescind or he modifies.
Mm-hmm.
Then, you know, instead of, it switches to the board as the subject. Is that clear to anyone else other than me? And my other one thing I wanted to add is I was reading about the NHIAA guidance, and I couldn't find my hands on it just now, but I read it this week where it was saying that parents have to drive their own kids. They can't drive other people's kids. And I'm not sure if it said students could drive themselves. And I'll keep looking for that to try to back that up. But I thought I read that this week. So, thank you.
Mr. Coughlin.
Yeah, so just to respond to what Laura's comment about the run-in sentence, I would ask Mr. O'Keefe to make a judgment about that because that was written by a lawyer, 4 lawyers. So maybe you can say whether Laura's suggestion is appropriate or not. I'll leave you to do that after I finish talking. I just want to point out that we also want to adopt this in the SAU. So in addition to this being the first reading for the individual districts that we'll all address it next week, we'll have to cycle back to this at the next SAU meeting to adopt it for the SAU.
Thank you, Steve. That's a great suggestion, and I'm in concurrence with you. I do believe that it's pretty clear there's a break in the sentence that it's any of the above stated phrases. Mr. St. Dennis.
Thank you. Yeah, just a comment on this one, more on the health and the social emotional well-being of any of the students that are deemed medically incapable of wearing a mask during school hours. My concern is more what's being done to not only protect their health, but to also protect their social emotional aspects in a classroom. Let's say they have 15 kids in the class, 14 of them wearing a mask and one's not. That kid is evidently going to be singled out. And what can be done if conversation hasn't already happened to make sure everybody understands that this kid's not a rebel, this kid's not doing things to the beat of his own drum, but it's because of a certain reason, but not necessarily calling or singling this student out for that. I don't know if anything needs to be worded in here for that, but more on a different building to building level of is there commonality in how a teacher can help diffuse that situation for what could become a pretty bad bullying situation. So.
Great comments, Scott. Thank you very much. Let's go to Tom.
My only comment on Scott's comment is, isn't that sort of practice already where teachers and kids, and if there's a para in there with the kid, isn't that already the practice where, teachers may have to explain why this kid has any sort of special treatment or is receiving any sort of special treatment or has to, explain away any behavioral issues? I don't think it's a policy thing. I think it's just part of the natural teaching environment where teachers and paras in the classroom already cover this type of thing as part of the daily curriculum. At least I would imagine it is. Somebody may tell me I'm wrong, but it would seem that there's just part of their everyday duties to explain away any behavior that's different from the normal behavior of the rest of the kids.
Thank you, Tom. Seeing no other comments here, Beth, did you want to entertain a motion to move this down to the individual boards as a first read tonight? And then Steve, we will bring this up at our next SAU meeting. We don't need a motion for that piece for the second read and adoption at the SAU level.
Yeah, so can I please have a motion to move these down to our individual boards for approval next week as the second read?
Great. Do we have a second on that?
I'll second.
Yes, Amy Facey, G2. Let's go to the roll call here. Ms. Kuzma.
Yes.
Actually, let's stop. I apologize. Any discussion to follow my Robert's Rules of Order? Seeing no discussion, let's call the vote. Ms. Kuzma.
Yes.
Mr. Gauthier.
Gauthier, yes.
Ms. Beam.
Beam, yes.
Ms. Grunshin.
Grugin, yes.
Mr. Conklin.
Conklin, yes.
Mr. Gronstra.
Yes.
Mrs. Facey.
Facey, yes.
Mr. Chen.
Yes.
Mr. Coughlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Taylor. Mrs. Taylor. Mrs. Taylor,
I had said Taylor, no.
Mr. Torres,
Torres, yes.
Mrs. Grund,
Grund, yes.
Mrs. Lawrence,
Lawrence, yes.
Mr. Eckhoff,
Goff, yes.
Mr. St. Dennis,
St. Dennis, yes.
O'Keefe, yes. So that's 15 yes, 1 no. Motion passes to transmit the policy to the individual boards for the second reading and adoption. Mr. Superintendent, was there anything else that you wanted to cover this evening? I know you've got a non-public listed. I'm assuming there's none there to be discussed at this meeting. And then I do want to open it up for public comment one more time.
Nothing else, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the board. Having such broad support for our plan shows how unified our school district is, how unified our towns are, and it gives credence to the transparent process that all of you participated in along the way. And I just want to thank all of you as board members for your thoughtful comments, your insights, your questions, and for getting us to such a broad consensus. It's a really proud night for me and for the team.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent, for your hard work and for that of your staff. I'm going to open up the floor to public comments. Again, for comments only, questions should be submitted through the question answer feature through the Zoom functionality. So anyone wishing to make a public comment for a term limit of 3 minutes, please do so by raising your hand and you'll be called on individually. Again, public comments, raise your hands using the functionality through the raise my hand feature. Great, seeing no public comments, I will entertain a motion to close.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, sir.
I remember like 4 or 5 years ago when we started this meeting, didn't you list 4 things we want to accomplish? And I think we only accomplished 3, and I can't remember what the 4th is.
Great question. Is the appropriations we're sending to the individual level, though, correct, Mr. Steele?
That's exactly right. That's the 4th thing.
Yep. And so, Mr. Coughlin, we're going to cover the 4th component at our individual board meetings next week for conversation and consultation with the SAU staff on the expected cost of our district-wide plan.
Okay, thank you.
Great, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion from Ms. Facey. I see you raising your hand over there. To close the meeting.
Yes, I'll make a motion to close the meeting.
Great, and no seconds needed. So thank you everyone for your time, and have a great evening and stay safe.